7:02.
Recording in progress.
We'll call to order this town council meeting on December 27th, 2022. We can all rise to the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America,
Republic.
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, everyone be seated. Thank you. Proclamations and presentations, we have none. It brings us to item 5, public petition, communication, and public participation on the subject of the jurisdiction of the town council, the 2-minute limit. If you're on Zoom, you can hit *9, otherwise, if you're on a mobile device, or if you're on Zoom, you can raise hand function. Nobody's in the public other than invited guests, so going once, going twice. Move on to item 6, public hearing items, there are none. 7A, reports of boards and committees responsible to council, no updates. Next month will be the first meeting of the month, or first meeting of the year for the firehouse subcommittee. That brings us to 7B, reports of town council liaisons. Gonna start from my left, Councilman Murray.
Nothing happened.
Councilor Khan,
Nothing.
Vice Chair Egan.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Joe.
But subcommittee meets tomorrow, but nothing for me either.
All right. Councilor Luba, do you have anything to report for liaisons?
No, sir, Mr. Chair, thank you.
And I had a water commission meeting last Monday, not too much to report there, finances are good, just a lot of robust discussion on ongoing projects and we can make it water's changes in leadership, so that's it for me. All right, that brings us to item 8.1, discussion of legislative concerns with state legislators. So with us tonight, we have Representative Acker, Representative Nuccio, and Senator-elect Gordon. So if you guys want to take a seat up to the front, Representative Nuccio is going to join you. As
We're gonna
well.
get close. Oh, am I gonna give it to you guys? That's even better. Amy, if you want here. I don't know.
You're good.
Exactly.
Right, so we haven't done this in a while. I feel like last time we did this in person, we've been through 2020, pre-pandemic, so. I guess if you guys want to first do a quick introduction, which committees you serve on, and then I think we'll just open the floor to questions and answers from council members to the legislators.
I'll go first. I was hoping not to serve in any committee, so I can just have an easy 2 years. That didn't happen. So I'm actually going to be on public health, which as a doctor, I was hoping to be. I'm going to be the ranking member on the Senate side on public safety. I'm on Veterans Affairs and I'm on appropriations.
Tammy Show, day rep, second term. I am ranking member, okay, go. I am ranking member of appropriations, on insurance, I'm on executive nominations, and I'm also on screening.
Representative Tim Ackert, probably serving Tolland for my 6th term. And looking forward to, this discussion as always, as you did mention, it's been about 3 years since we were in. And so it's always been a good dialogue that we've had with the council. I'm serving again on general law, energy and technology. I'm ranking on the labor committee. And I'm on legislative management and I've just been appointed deputy. Yeah, thank you. Deputy minority leader. So congratulations. Thank you.
All right, so open the floor for questions. Councilor Nuccio.
Sorry, everybody got really bad back. I'm a little slow tonight. Well, I'll just start off with, I guess an easy one. So it's a very basic question. Just what are your 2 or 3 first big goals that you think you'll accomplish or want to accomplish within the next 3 to 6 months? Softball question.
So that's what the session.
But that's actually a perfect time.
Yeah, exactly.
If you think about
Yeah.
it, hopefully we get them accomplished early. I think the focus that we've kind of put out is, always education is a key component to everything. So that we looked at. So, improving our education relationships with, State Department of Education on our level, it's dealing with your boards of eds, but with us, it's dealing with the State Department of Education, see what their goals are. I think the key is what, commissioners are going to be back, for this legislative session and working with them. On all levels. I think the other one is public safety is going to be a key role that's coming out of the Republican caucus. My personal is more in the labor area, jobs, which I've been working on for since I've been there. But really a focus now, and I've been asked, I was asked to take on a role of ranking of labor along with my other duties. And I've already had a great conversation with the chair, Representative Q Williams, already reached out to me and on the other side of the aisle. I think it's one thing that we have to do is make sure that we're reaching across the aisle on behalf of our communities. And that's going to be a key. So your direction is really key to us. It really is. So Mr. Foley, your input is, of course, going to be, cracking a whip on us, say, make sure that you're on our side. So that's our key. That's my key. And I think really direction comes from the community. It comes from our boards of eds and town councils and most of our legislative actions. So.
For me this year, definitely, I think the first week I was elected, I was on the phone with the Speaker of the House complaining about the ECS formula. Straight up, one of my top priorities. We had a 2-year freeze in the last budget. There was a new formula floated in the last legislative session. Still not a fan of it, but Tolland does fare better than we have in the past with that formula. But I've been talking to Kathy Austin, who is a senator who also represents a lot of small towns who are impacted negatively from ECS also. I've talked to the school finance committee on looking at adding a transportation factor because we have higher transportation costs in a lot of the smaller towns. So we're looking at, we know that there will be something kicked around, probably similar to the same formula that was out in the last legislative session. I'm hoping to kind of have some input on trying to mold that. So Tolland loses the most ECS funding in the entire state of Connecticut at $350,000 a year, which puts undue tax burden on the residents to maintain the school system when you have mandates like MBR and everything else. So working on that is key, trying to come up with a better formula where the state of Connecticut is actually funding education and not abdicating that responsibility to the towns. That's a big one. I am also working on this piece of legislation that was thrown into the implementer that is really bad legislation. And it's going to impact the towns on the property values of cars. They're going to be using the MSRP instead of looking at the NADA value of cars. And I did out, Jason will tell you, I called and got all of my tax bills from since I've lived in Tolland for all of my vehicles and did the formula on it. And for the majority of my vehicles, it's between 100 and 120% higher taxes with this formula. So that's going to be a direct impact to the towns. Looking at that, on the insurance committee, we're looking at reviewing the CON process, and we're looking at the monopolies that are being created right now with Hartford Hospital and Trinity, and the buying up of all these community hospitals. I'm currently in a battle with Johnson Memorial because they were proposing to close everything except their ED. And Kurt Vale, myself, we fought pretty down and dirty in July to get them to reconsider that, and they now currently are doing inpatient ICU, and they're doing some surgeries again, but they are pretty steadfast that they want to get rid of maternity, which is not an option as far as I'm concerned, because that will mean we have no maternity services at all for the northeast corner. The closest will be Manchester, and they're funneling everybody out to Hartford, which I don't think is an acceptable option. So working on the cost of healthcare. And honestly, on appropriations, I'm going to do what I don't know what I get, like 75% of Tolland really agrees with me on, which is cutting the cost of the budget and trying to make Connecticut more affordable. So it's going to be a fun year. It's going to be a fun year. I don't plan on seeing my family ever.
But I'll see a lot of you on.
I
Nice.
Nice.
That's right.
It's just a different
Exactly.
That's right.
You know,
Such an-
hopefully they bring me cookies, you know.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
That's right, bring it down the floor from the Senate chamber.
You're not allowed down from the Senate chamber, secluded.
I find places to hide.
Exactly.
No, I mean, I echo what they said, you know, some of the big things for me as a doctor and also as I've been a state physician leader for many years, past president of the State Medical Society, and I'm still on there as an officer of their organization. Healthcare has been a big thing for me. I've been dealing with it in the trenches, just not trying to fight against, you know, the consolidation of healthcare that's going on, which has been an ongoing battle in this state, not helped by a prior governor administration, which really pushed things that way, but really trying to defend the local care. And that's just not the community hospitals. And I have a number of them in my district or who serve my district. And I myself work at a community hospital, so I know what it's like to work at that level and at a big hospital system, but also the doctors and everybody else in the healthcare team that's out there in the community. People forget there's a lot of care that goes on outside of a hospital, which is actually good. You want to keep people out of an ER in a hospital if you can help it, although ER overcrowding is a separate issue, which is going to percolate its way up again this session about how you deal with that and how you fund ERs. But I think there's a lot that can be done to try to continue to push. And you really have to hold, and I've been vocal on this for years, you got to hold the big hospital systems feet to the fire. It's easy to consolidate, it saves them money. But at the end of the day, that's not really where a lot of people want to get their healthcare. And that really requires yelling and screaming sometimes. And I've been doing that behind the scenes, and I look forward to doing it more publicly in my role as a state senator. Another thing that I feel very passionately about, and I'm a town official in my town, chairman of planning and zoning for 15 years, going on to my 16th. And I know what it's like to serve in a town and deal with town issues is needing to fight for our towns. No offense to the cities, but the cities seem to get a lot. And we just need to keep on yelling and screaming and making our voices heard for the towns, just not for budget, but a lot of different things. Already as senator-elect, I've been thrown into that with meetings and constituent services and things like that, working with our current senator during the rest of his term. Another thing I feel passionately about, and I've talked a lot about this over years, is supporting small businesses. We need to continue to support small businesses. I think there's more the state can do to support small businesses. And if you really look at the statistics, even though in the news, the big businesses seem to make the headlines, vast majority of businesses in this state are actually small businesses, and especially ones that are less than 100 employees. And a lot of them are just, you know, the people own and run their own business. And that's a big issue. We see it in every single town. I can tell you in Woodstock, people don't realize how many small businesses we actually have because you don't see them out and about in our streets. A lot of people have small businesses in their homes nowadays, and that's a good business for them, and that's what they want to do and really convert their home into a business. I think there's a lot that the state can do in that regard, and I'm looking forward to doing that, you know, and fighting that fight and moving it from the local level to the state level. Really needs to do more. We all hear about overregulation and overtaxation on businesses. That's real, and I think there's things the state can do to somewhat get out of the way of some of the small businesses and facilitate them. And that also helps create good jobs in the community. People stay in the community, and that's what we want in this state. And there's many things on my list, but one of the others and why I wanted to be on public safety is I think public safety, and I know is a big issue. I hear it in all of the 13 towns that I'm going to be representing. And I heard it when I've been out and about in Tolland, and that's a real issue for people. And I think there's things that the state can be doing more. Working with police, working with local, and most of the towns in my district just rely upon state police, don't have their own police force, and they just can't afford it. I know in Woodstock, every couple of years it comes up, and when people realize what the mill rate will go up to, they say no to it. So I think there's more the state can do. And I look forward on public safety to being involved with that already. I'm getting involved with that, and we'll have some bills I'm hoping to work on with people in that regard. And, you know, I don't want to keep anything off the list because it's a long list of things that are of interest to people. Those are some of the things, you know, that I'm looking forward to doing. But also, you know, I think we have to keep in mind that even though the state is flush with money, I always view that that's taxpayer money. And I think, yes, there are some things the state can do with that money wisely and smartly and think long term. But I think there's also ways the state can take a look and see what it can do to help the taxpayers and the business owners who foot the bill. Because they also need that money to fund town services, and they need that money to fund their own families. And that's a real issue. And I look forward to seeing what we can do in that regard. I think there'll be some heated discussions and debates on that issue when it comes up for what to do with the budget and tax policy. But I look forward to delving into that as best as I can.
That was really good. Can I just ask one more?
Sure. And then I think Councilor Luba has their hand up after.
Lou, can I ask one more question?
I'm sure he's fine. Yeah, he's got a thumbs up. You're good.
No, mine, so we also have our own goals and I don't really hear too much anymore. It's just the crumbling foundations. Tolland still has a problem with it. And I know there's other things that I've probably bring up, like the camper wells and everything too. But it seems to go silent. Is there any goals that you have on that for Tolland? Probably some other towns that you have issues with too.
Well, I think all of us are probably on the Crumbling Foundation Caucus, which I've been on the Crumbling Foundation Caucus since its inception pretty much. So we're always in the, I think sometimes quiet is good. That means that they're moving through the list of getting repairs. And that's really what I've heard mostly, you know. What we had to do in the last session was increase the individual's, allotment. Because contractors were stepping away because they couldn't financially do the work. So, we did bump that up to 190, 190,000 now. And so that kept the contractors that we had. So part of the issue isn't really, it's, getting the work done. As everybody knows, it's a long process for most families. A couple processes are out there now, that obviously replacing it with concrete and also replacing it with the fiber panels is another that's really becoming, a matter of fact, one of your business owners in town is the one that champions the fiber panels, and he was right on Anthony Drive. So, so there is, and I think sometimes when you don't hear about it, it means that they're doing their job. Mike McGlaris and his team at CISIC has really been responsive. A friend of mine had to make a phone call to see just where, because she didn't think she was going to be getting it for another year or two. Mike McGlaris answered the phone when she called. And he said, I actually know who's handling your case. And the next person, she said, you know what? You're on one of my list of 20 to call to give them the good news that you're on for next year. And then the nervous gets part, that nerve wracking part, what do you do with your goods? So I think that we've made, I think the process is working. I think that it's a model for how a captive insurance program works. And so unless you've heard otherwise, and we would always love to hear, if there's somebody that has a concern. But one of the things that people were doing because they got reduced taxes from your local municipalities, they're getting on the list, getting in the queue, but then not moving forward. So we were trying to make sure that they were moving forward. You've already been approved. The people behind you that want to get it done. But you're taking, and obviously the biggest thing that helps your municipality and other municipalities in there is that we get these back in the tax rolls to pay for their houses as a whole. That helps your budget, obviously. And so that's one of the things that we were finding out. And so we're encouraging them to, get their foundations done. So. But overall, I think quiet is good on that front. If you hear different, we'd love to know. We're always encouraging. We were through this administration, we got substantially more money to put into the fund, and that makes it's getting the bond commission to actually allocate it. It's been approved. It's actually getting that bond commission to allocate it, and we've been fortunate in that we were able to secure with support, from both sides of the aisle. I mean, I had to fight, legislators on my side of the aisle, and they said, there's no way we're going to support this, Tim. It doesn't affect my community. I said, yeah, but there's going to be something that comes up that's going to affect your community that you're going to want me to support. So it was bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition to the legislation that we got passed. And that's not a bad thing, if it's, but it's, I think on a whole, we're in the best direction. We resolved an issue that was sat for too long to be resolved, so.
Just have one more follow-up. So the people that you said basically stay on, so they get the tax reduction, right? Is that what you said?
From your
earlier?
property tax, yeah.
And others are waiting in line. Is there a time frame where if you don't buy or take the next step?
No, there's not, there's
So
not.
they-
You're only allowed, I think it's 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, that you're allowed to be on.
They got rid of it
They-
last session.
They took that off, because that was kind of the thing that you can only be, well, we didn't. You had to be, well, yeah, you had to be in the queue, which got you in the queue, yeah, so.
Yeah, so we got $100 million passed in the last legislative session. $20 million for the next 5 years, on top of the money that's gonna be distributed from the homeowners policies that start kicking in now, which is another, I wanna say maybe $10 million a year. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure.
It's more than that. actually.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
19,
It's like, it's
That's a
it's
good
12
chunk.
it's 12 to 14 million now that we
A
get
year.
from the
From the insurance
$12.
policies. So there's funding that's there that's gonna sustain it for the next 5 years. The issues that I'm hearing about now are around building inspectors and people who are getting their foundations done. And the building inspectors aren't always doing the greatest job of actually inspecting it. We've had a couple of homes that have had inspections, but then found out that there were issues with how the house came back down on the foundation. And that kind of loops around to the problem of the fact that, a lot of the state employees are working 1 day in the office, 2 days in the office, and working at home for the rest of it. So there's been a lag in the training that building inspectors are supposed to be getting from the perspective of new code and refresher and continuing education stuff. It's not happening. So that's a problem because, we've got people who are working at home. They're not in the office. There's nobody out there actually doing this training. Now we're starting to see it impacting people's homes when they're getting their foundation fixed. So that's something that has been raised up. There is the legislation, just a couple of things. Last year, there was a piece of legislation that was raised that Tolland was very in favor of that wasn't worded the way that we talked about in the last town council meeting. It said basically something along the lines of you could only have a tax reduction for a certain amount of time. And I'll be honest, I used to be on that train too. I used to say, well, if you're not going to get it done, then you don't get the tax reduction. But after learning more about it in that, the way that your home is assessed is the value of it at resale. And if you have a crumbling foundation, you're not going to resale it at $450,000, right? So if you don't ever get your foundation fixed, the value of your home is forever impacted. So I don't think that you should be telling people, if you don't get your home fixed, we're going to charge you more than it's worth. Right, because you're not going to get that. But there is logic around what Brian was saying, if people have gotten payouts from their insurance company to have their foundation fixed and then haven't and have done something else with that money. At that point, I think we need to try to figure out what we do with that, right? Because they did get money to remediate the issue and they've chosen not to remediate the issue that
And they
doesn't.
get the savings on the
And
tax.
they're getting like a continued reduction on their taxes, which means that their neighbors are paying for them going on vacation or doing whatever it is that they did with that money. I don't know how we legislatively handle that, because then you're legislating how people handle their personal finances. I don't know if it has to be something linked to an insurance payout or the payout that indicates when you would get that reduction, something that I'm sure we'll be hearing about in the caucus. But last year, it was just, there wasn't enough information on it when the bill came forward and the way it was written, which pretty much, like, if you're a level 1, you're not on the list. You can't get on the list. So they should be getting a reduction for the value of their home. If they never get on that list and they don't fix their foundation, they still can't sell their home. And it doesn't mean it's not going to progress. So I think we need to learn more and we need to come up with something that's going to work, that's not going to allow that loophole that is there right now. With the contaminated wells, I've been working with Commissioner Boughton for about a year now to try to create a grant program that the state, he's looking for funding for. We're working with a couple of different departments at the state to try to figure out if there's a way to come up with some kind of grant program for the states that have contaminated wells. It's a lot of back and forth. Everything at the state is a lot of back and forth. I'm also working with Joe Courtney's office for some kind of federal remediation for contaminated wells. He has been in the meetings that we've had with the well issues and stuff, or he's sent somebody from his staff to look at it. So we are raising it up to a higher level, and also, I don't know how we do this, but we're working on getting the state to recognize that you cannot put thousands of pounds of salt on the ground and expect it to disappear. Salt doesn't do that. So trying to find an environmentally friendly way to provide the black roads that everybody wants, that's not poisoning people's wells. So that's a big issue, and it's going to take a lot. But if you go back and look at the 2007 report that was done, the environmental report that the state of Connecticut used to pressure all of the towns to go to this treatment thing, none of it has panned out. Like, the assumptions there have been proven scientifically to not be accurate. And we're seeing the effects of that now. So there's a lot to do on that one. A lot to do.
I'm good for now. Thank you, guys.
Councilor Luba, you're up.
I'll lose.
He's either one is.
All good, all good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I apologize, I can't be there for another meeting. Hope everyone's well. First off, to our legislators, I want to thank you very much for all that you do for our towns. I know it's a thankless job, and that all of us here truly appreciate what you're doing. And actually, the question that Colleen led forward with and that Tammy answered was one of my main questions, which is with the crumbling, tying into the crumbling foundations, is it tainted wells? And if there's any relief that we'd be looking for on the state or federal level, but I think that that's been pretty well addressed right now, unless there's anything else that any of the three of you would like to add to that. But that is my main question, is how, without placing blame on anybody or acknowledging any type of responsibility for anyone in this, is my bottom line is, how do we help our townspeople? How do we help our residents with their wells? Because that's the biggest issue. We could always find out who's responsible for it later, but it's a matter of getting these people wells that work or water systems that work, rather than having to rely upon buying bottled water or whatever that they've been doing for now, some of them for 5 years or more. That's my question.
Well, I think that Tammy's really, been taking the lead on this, sat in some the meetings on it. It's really just getting action, whether it's, through the state and, through the, as you mentioned, she worked with Mark Boughton. Having it be recognized, bring in, whether it's another piece of legislation that has to be brought forth, and, whether it goes through planning and development, wherever it may go through. But, she sits on a power committee, so maybe nudging some people in that power committee, the appropriations, but it really is, a true issue that how do we help the residents, and, is this, and we forget about the fault part, we treat the roads and we treat the roads. If it, when you have a certain type of landscape, I've got people in Coventry and people in Columbia that have dealt with it and are dealing with it right now. And same if they're located near, unfortunately, where the salts are stored. And that's what's affecting theirs. And so relocating the salts, but then how do you fix the problem that they have? So, it's a process. You just got to keep bringing it to the attention and hope that you can help them in some manner. What that is, whether it's a water, getting Connecticut water in here, bringing a water system, to that area, it costs money. But to no fault of their own, like the crumbling foundations, they don't have a suitable well. So, bringing up legislation and take it from there. I don't know. That's about what we can do as legislators, and a push from you, so a support.
And I agree. In where I live in my district, we don't have much in the way of crumbling foundations, fortunately. We do actually have well contamination, some of it caused by several towns, their own DPWs. We fixed that in Woodstock over the years, magically just keeping salt out literally right near wells. Magically led to massive salt plumes that we had to deal with. Some of it was partly due to the state as well. And we finally got the state to kick in and do some things and be of help. I'm looking forward to being on the caucus for Crumbling Foundations and also liaisoning with the board. I know Senator Dan Champagne has a liaison spot with that board, and I'm looking to take his place from the Senate Republican side. So once I become a senator, then they can submit my name. But they can't do it yet until I'm a senator. But looking forward to see what I can do. And I agree, you know, these people, it's not their fault. There's a lot of things that aren't people's fault, but yet they have to foot the bill for it and deal with it. And you can deal with the state or whatever and drag people all around for years and years trying to figure out who's to blame. And I don't know if you really get anywhere with that. Sometimes you actually never really get anybody to admit anything other than stepping up and trying to get things done. And I look forward to working with you too, seeing what we can do and others to push on that. And the more you push on it, hopefully more will be able to get done for it. And just not a Band-Aid fix. I'm never a fan of a Band-Aid fix where, yeah, you know, 1 year you get something done and that's it. You really want something that is more long-term to help people, since fixing these things doesn't happen overnight. Absolutely doesn't. Many, many nights it takes over years.
Government is slow.
Sometimes that's good.
Exactly.
Yes,
You know,
Sometimes
it's-
that's good, not always.
Purposeful, yeah.
But
Yes.
there's a process that we follow and the committee meetings work and the public hearings work and what's aired out, a piece of legislation I thought was a home run when I had the first speaker on a public hearing was like, oh, maybe that's not a very good piece of legislation. So it depends on, you know, so it's sometimes, but reacting to an issue like what you're dealing with here in town with the wells could be a little quicker. The other thing is that, you know, would still like to see more support. And every time I talk about Crumbling Foundations, I talk about it being a larger than state of Connecticut issue. And as we have people traveling into the northern, you know, the delegation now that has worked on Connecticut Foundation is now in Massachusetts, working and finding how big of an issue it is in Massachusetts now. So why, granted, it's not a tornado, it's not a flood, but it is a catastrophic event. And that why can't we have the federal side help out more? I know that Joe Courtney's been pushing and John Larson's been pushing, but met with Blumenthal and I've met with Murphy, as many of us have, and say this is, and they said, yeah, this deserves, you know, some support. Well, we would love to see that help rather than the state taxpayers continually to fund it. And I'm glad they have. I'm glad we have got that support. So, but I'd like to see more on the federal side.
All set, Lou?
Yes, thank you all for the answers. Thank you for all that you're doing for us up there. I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad to see that we have some solid experience and solid leadership up there in Hartford for us. So thank you all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Luba. I'm gonna hop in really quick and then Vice Chair Regan. I just wanted to keep it on the environment in terms of waste management.
Yeah.
And obviously Hartford, that's the whole thing, but it's part of CROG and that's one of the goals that was listed out that we had approved last week. I'm curious where you three sit in terms of what our solutions can be. I mean, obviously years and years ago, it was promoted, oh, you know, trash costs money, but recycling offsets it. Now it's costing the towns money to pay for recycling to be done. What do you think could be done to help support the towns to kind of offset that and maybe also promote maybe food waste being an area that has a lot of agriculture, you know, going into the quiet corner? What can we do to help reduce that food waste? Maybe do regional composting or any kind of sort of regional based efforts to offset that cost.
Well, one of the things that when I got on the Energy and Technology Committee many years ago, as a ranking member, I heard about this thing called anaerobic digesters.
There.
And I had no idea what they were. And then I realized that we're one of the few countries that don't take advantage of how we actually take our food waste and animal waste and make energy out of it. I'm proud to say that Coventry is an enormous anaerobic digester going in that will take the that is looking to partner with areas to take the food waste and properly you know, use it to create energy, and also has no effect on the air itself. The smell is there.
Oh, it's
but,
bad.
but it's a farm anyways over there, and we're used to that over there. It's a little different, but so I think that, well, you know, to me, I've always think that we overpackage everything.
Mhm.
And I've always been, you know, so when we can't, and now that we look at, there are some opportunities that are coming out that we're gonna hear about this legislative session that has a different, actually, a different type of packaging product. that is biodegradable and disposable rather than that the level they have to recycle, so that we actually can disperse that, whether it is in a digester or something along that line. So we just overpackage stuff. I mean, so if we could just learn as a society to stop over packaging things, and then on the recycling piece, and obviously that you mentioned that we're closing the plant in Hartford. So what are the options out there that we're gonna do? So there's a big digester in Fort Hills, Thompson, they're aerosol, but they take so long to actually permit. So it's kind of on the side of our regulatory body that slows them down. So that's the area that I've been, so two areas that I think we need to do is we've got to limit packaging products. We've got to figure out a way to do that, just so you don't have to have this issue of trying to get rid of stuff. And then have a dual purpose, place to get rid of our food waste and get rid of our animal waste, and then make something valuable out of it, which is energy and gas, natural and gas products. So
And I've actually done a number of tours of these places wearing my hat as planning and zoning. We've actually had several proposals at the farms in my town. And we're used to the farm smell. Actually, they come up to my field and I have a hay field I own and they spray it. There's one in Ellington that they're building, a big one, really nice, very, very nice one. A big thing is not so much building it, these companies, and I've seen the schematics, and we've actually in my town of Woodstock, and we've looked to see what's happened in Coventry. We're going to hopefully create some regulations for agriculture focused of digesters. That's different than the commercial ones, because people get concerned, truckload after truckload after truckload of things coming in from out of town. Is that really what you want? Those are commercial entities, but there are a lot of farms that want to do that type of work, which isn't necessarily commercial, although these things are modular. Actually, the science is phenomenal behind it. And they have grow out plans, build out analyses. So when you put these things in, if you're smart and you have enough land, you can actually kind of pre-populate how you might want to grow it, which is very, very strategic. A lot of it is the regulation. I hear this from the folks who are building them and the folks who are getting them built on their properties. And I was in a meeting a few weeks ago with some farmers in my town, and we talked with the folks from Fort Hill about the process. And the regulation process is very slow and cumbersome. It does not need to be. If you're trying to encourage some of these things, why are you dragging people through the mud multiple times and taking forever? It adds not just time, but really money to the process. And so I think there's ways one can streamline the process. A lot of towns have done these things for various purposes, speaking from experience. The state itself just doesn't seem to want to streamline certain things. Yet on the other hand, it wants to promote certain things like that, including, building out alternative energy other than digesters. It talks a great talk, but then if you look at the process and the regulatory aspect, it's, you rather just hit yourself over the head. It's more fun doing that. So I think there's ways to get the state to actually truly facilitate if it really wants to. But the biodigesters are very, very interesting. One thing we need to be careful about is the downside is if you have too big of a commercial entity, what that impact can be on a town. And there's ways that you can limit that and think about that. You want these places to be successful, but on the other hand, if they get too successful, it can turn into a big monster for a town. But on the other hand, for what a lot of the farms want to do, they're not looking to make it into this mammoth thing. They actually have the product that goes into it, very, very much so. And it's amazing the energy that can be produced. And then what they can do, there's several byproducts from this that can actually still be used for composting, all sorts of things. And I know the folks in Fort Hill well, and they've actually thought out about what they can do, just not develop energy. So there's a lot of interesting ways to go with that. I think that is one of the ways absolutely of the future. Some other states have been doing it, but I think in Europe, they do it more than we do. Yeah, very, very much so. But they also, if you look at their regulatory stuff, they actually streamline the process because they realize that it's something that needs to be done. And all right, let's facilitate it as best as we can, but not loosen the oversight so much that it's just a free-for-all Wild West. And I think there's ways we can move the state to improve that. I agree with Tim. Overpackaging is just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, from a marketing point of view, you go in and, I'm always happy when I go and buy my potato chips. Oh, with this monster family size party bag. And by law, they're allowed to have a certain amount of that airspace to protect their product, but it's like, how much am I actually getting? So I think, for that, we're just used to over packaging because it's phenomenal. Oh, look how big this thing is. Everyone doesn't like because, oh, now everything is smaller package. I'm not getting as much, but actually, if you really look at it, for the weight, you really are. There's a lot of that just needs to be done. Industry has been moving in that direction. I know there's a number of local folks in some of the towns who have been pushing on that and spearheading it. Does it require some type of state or federal push? It does, to get the businesses to do it. But also, if more and more they hear from the public that this is what public wants and the stores want, they do respond to that type of stuff because it's good for them. And then they can say they're doing something for the environment. I can tell you in my town with our transfer station, we've been facing an issue. What do we do with more and more people putting recycle? Some people bring things that they think are recyclable, but they're clearly not. And how do we pay for all of that without upping the sticker every year to go to the transfer station and price people out? And we've been trying to be creative in that regard as far as what to do, but also work with businesses, which I can tell you in Woodstock, we haven't really been much to try to encourage businesses as well to get onto the recycling bandwagon and giving them some type of deal when they do and bring to our transfer station. And we've had some positive reception in that regard. It's a lot of small businesses, a lot of contractors as well, who we've worked with. So I think there's ways to do that. I got to be honest with you, some of it requires state and federal push in order to get some of it done, but not be heavy-handed. I'm always concerned when the government is heavy-handed because sometimes it doesn't think things through. And then it creates a problem, unintended consequences. But I think there's some things that can be done in a smart way. But the other is the state should look at what some towns are doing and really see, hey, some towns are doing a good job. And maybe the state should be encouraging that and not just force feeding certain things. So I think that it's a partnership. And I'm a firm believer that the more the state looks at what towns are doing, I think the more the state will learn and try to have a good partnership. I'm all for working in partnerships as best as possible, but it really takes, people understanding what's happening. Nothing beats going out in the field and seeing exactly what's happening. I've had tours of my own transfer station after hours just to see what they do, and the amount of stuff that just in the course of a weekend that gets dumped. That is just unbelievable stuff. Is just incredible. And that has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And I gotta be honest with you, lots of states don't want to accept it. What was that story years ago, that barge that was floating around from state to state? No state wanted it. I don't know where it ended up. I think it came from New York City originally. It was just floating around. No state wanted it, and New York City didn't want it back. I think that's where it came from. Just a massive barge full of trash. But I think also the public more and more, if they realize with education, can get on the bandwagon. I've actually been encouraged with some schools I've gone to in the past couple of months and see some programs they've been doing with the kids, even at a young age, when it comes to understanding the environmental impact of what you do and what you can do to be a good steward of the environment. It's amazing how much the kids actually know and realize that, if I buy something and then I throw it away, it has to go somewhere. It doesn't magically disappear because my parents took it. But it's amazing from an education point of view. I saw it with my son growing up, what they actually learn. And if that's the next generation coming forward, if they have that mentality, that moves the needle in the right direction.
That's true, because I see with my kids, they do bottle, like they collect the bottle caps and they recycle, or not recycle, but they do something with that.
Like a capping contest. or
Yeah,
something,
it is, they do, and they learn it. Because plastic bags can go in the ocean and it can kill, they do teach environment a lot more in schools.
Oh, they do. I saw it with my son. He's in college now and he has an interest in environmental studies. He's also interested in psychology, so I don't know how he's going to marry the two. But we'll see. He's a freshman. He has time to figure things out. But when he goes shopping with me, and I admit I like buying junk food because that's part of my diet. But as a doctor, I can write a note to myself saying it's okay. But he actually will comment upon, this packaging is horrific, or do you realize how, and he picks up on that type of stuff, or this isn't biodegradable, and and he points that stuff out, and I'm like, you're right. You know, and so he's in tune with that, but he learned this stuff during school. So, you know, I think more and more, as the kids are growing up and that's their mentality, that can push, the companies listen to that stuff, I can tell you. And they do change. I think there's no way around, there's a lot of packaging that is biodegradable that they can use. And still make it look nice. I can tell you, like in the medical field, we're looking at that. I mean, there's certain things we can't get away from, like IV bags and things like that, that right now we have to have certain types of sterile plastics and things like that. But there's actually a lot of over packaging just in the equipment and drugs and everything that hospitals buy. There's been a big effort in the medical field to try to package it better, more environmentally friendly, biodegradable. And if you can do that in a hospital system, you can do that in many systems.
So the anaerobic digesters are really great. The legislation that we passed on trying to help them was good. I see as a possible way for the towns to work with that. Like if you look at the one in Coventry, they're supplying energy at a significantly reduced rate right now to New Britain. New Britain is saving money hand over fist right now with the energy that's being created by the anaerobic digester in Coventry. Those things, I've been on tours with them, you never forget that smell. But all of the people that were there were telling me the red tape and the money, the amount of money that they have to spend to get permits for this and the dragging out of all of the permits. Now, by the time they actually get one, they have to reapply, like kind of a thing. The state can do better on that. And from the town perspective, I think it would be someplace that we may be able to partner with them to say, is there a program that we can do that would separate food waste, and for our restaurants, especially because they use the oil, they use stuff like that from these restaurants to fuel these digesters. So if there's a way for us as a town to kind of work on a program where we could break out the food waste or the restaurant waste and stuff like that and provide it to these anaerobic digesters, it may be some sort of way to kind of offset the cost that we're seeing in recycling. Unfortunately, I don't see the recycling changing. I don't think we're ever going to be in a model where we're going to get paid again to do the recycling. China is combative on that, and they were the only ones who are willing to buy our recycling. And unfortunately, Americans don't want to take care of their trash. You know, like the closing of the waste treatment center in Hartford. There's a lot of talks going on what are we going to do now? Like, what's the plan now that it's closing? And doing that in an environmental way where we're not just throwing everybody's trash into the cities and then the people in the cities have to deal with it, right? So there's a lot of conversations that have to be had to figure out what we're going to do and where we're going to put our garbage. So from the town perspective, though, I do think that there's a possibility to try to find a way to work with Coventry and Ellington and any other place that's local enough to create some sort of program where we could be selling our food waste and such to these digesters. So that's a possibility.
Even working with the local grocery chains, whether it's Big Y or other ones, or even the Highland Park markets of the
Exactly.
district.
Yeah. Like think of the amount of food waste. We just had holidays. I don't want to think about like, you know, the stuff that clearing off plates and everything else. I said to my kids, I'm like, I need to get a composter. And then I'm like, do you have any idea how much how this and that, the worms? And I'm like, I know. The last thing I have time for. But you know, we need to start thinking about stuff like that.
Let me get started with the fruitcakes. Those might never get digested fully.
No, those will never go away. They just stay and stay. Actually, composting, I own a big field next to my house. And it's a hay field, but I have a big compost pile. I don't do anything fancy with it. I just dump things into it and it just seems to do whatever.
Nature takes its course.
Appreciate that.
But I also live right near it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really a dairy farm. They raise the calves and then they sell them. But it's still a working farm and you can still smell it. But one thing about the farmers is they're aware of stuff. I mean, cows do produce gas. It's been very interesting. And I work with a number of farmers in my town government. They're all dairy farmers. That's the main farming in my town. And it's very interesting how they've set up some of when they build new farms with some of their equipment, what they do to try to capture certain gases, but also the breeds of animal and how they, over time, they're trying to engineer the animals and breeding and things like that with genetics and stuff. It's actually, it sounds like really crazy science, but it's actually stuff happening and stuff that they look into and see what they can do. Just not breed an animal to produce a lot of milk, which is of course what they want, but also was to do with waste production and things like that. There's a lot of science into that type of stuff, and a lot of farmers are aware of that. I've read some articles on that, and it's just wild what can be done and what's being looked at as the future of dairy farming. Because there is an environmental impact when you dairy farm. We all want meat and we all want milk, but there is an impact, and the farmers are aware of it. There's a lot of them are silent about it as far as the things they do, but if you go to the farms and see some of the stuff, it is quite interesting. A lot of them are in tune with it and looking into it. A lot of the equipment costs money. And they do look for federal grants and things like that through the Department of Agriculture. But there is things like that are being looked at as far as what does the future hold. I don't think you can make a cow gasless, but still, there are ways they're looking into what they can do to capture the gas and decrease production.
Thank you. I'll pass over the Vice Chair Regan.
Just very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thanks for coming out. I think it's important for our representatives and senators to come out and chat with us to find out really what's going on in our towns. And we've already talked about crumbling foundations and tainted wells, but it's okay for you to hear it again. We've made progress on crumbling foundations. I think a lot of people have been helped, but we have some very frustrated residents here in Tolland with tainted wells, and they are frustrated due to the fact that we've talked about it for years and they feel like there hasn't been a lot of progress made. So I'm just reiterating the fact. I don't have a question. I'm just telling you that we have frustrated people here in town that have had tainted wells for 5 years or more. And any progress that can be made in that front, it would be very, very much appreciated by them. But my question to Senator-elect Gordon and Representative Acker, you both talked about the consolidation of healthcare facilities. You mentioned Hartford Health and Trinity, and Yale New Haven's another one. So I'd like to get your opinions on how you think that's affecting people, because I've heard that's the world I travel in. I'm not a provider, but I'm in medical sales. So I'm familiar with all these institutions, and I've seen all this consolidation going on in the state of Connecticut over the years. So I'd be curious to hear your opinion on how you think that affects the residents in Tolland, because some people think that it'd be good. You have 3 800-pound gorillas slugging it out. That might be good for consumers. But I'd like to hear your opinion on that, on this.
Well, I'm happy to speak to it because I've spoken to this for years as a doctor, and as president of State Medical Society, I was actually on the other side of testifying on stuff. I don't think it is good. My opinion hasn't changed over many, many years. I can tell you, just not as a healthcare consumer, but as a doctor, it's just not consolidation of hospitals. It's consolidation of the insurance companies and what they do with lateral moves to buy other companies that aren't insurance companies, for example, Aetna, CVS. The problem is that when they consolidate, it's great for their bottom line. But for patient care, I have not seen it to be helpful. It takes so much time in my day and my staff's time to deal with these 800-pound gorillas, to deal with the insurances. You ask any doctor and he or she will tell you the same thing. We spend so much time having to fight insurances, deal with some of the stuff with the big hospital systems to get things done, that sometimes what you just have to do is just have to swing a bat. Some days I'm not there on the phone being nice. I'm just swinging a bat in order to get stuff done. I actually have testified that I don't think consolidation of the big hospitals into only a few big systems in this state is good. I've actually worked for a big systems, just not in this state, but in Massachusetts. But I like working in the community hospitals because, quite frankly, I can get a lot done in a community hospital than in a big hospital. And that's always been my experience for the past 30 years. The problem is that the state, under the Malloy administration, and I was in meetings with him representing doctors in this state, was pushing for that. I didn't think it was good at all. And it is a real issue where we can see the big ones buying out the small hospitals. Part of it is the small hospitals have difficulties surviving. And some of that is, a lot of it is reimbursements from the feds and the crazy type of reimbursement systems they have. And some of the schemes they come up with aren't always helpful for hospitals. But the problem is, once these hospitals get bought out and consolidated, you can't break them up. Another thing that people don't always realize is that over time, the big hospital systems have been buying up private practice entities. It was very common that you would see 1, 2, 3 doctor offices. They would have nurses, they would hire staff, and there's still a number of them around. I used to be in private practice before a big hospital system bought us out. The problem is that more and more when they get bought out, they become employees of the big hospital system. And so that can be a different way of having to deal with healthcare than when you're a private practice. And you're on the hospital staff, but you're not an employee. And those are real issues. We spent many years trying to figure out how to handle that through the state medical society, but the problem is it's economics. We see it, and I know I was in a meeting recently with Tammy. I'm well aware of what Johnson Memorial's been doing. I actually used to briefly be on their medical staff years ago. And I see it with what Wyndham Hospital had to go through. We see it with what may happen with Rockville. Day Kimball is in Putnam right next door to me, and they're going to be bought out likely by Covenant. And already this talk about cutting services, they look to consolidate their services in the big systems, in the big hospitals, because that's where they can actually save the money, as opposed to having to duplicate those services out in the community. So there's that economic drive, which unfortunately what it means is people have to then go to the big hospitals more and more. People don't want to do that. The big hospitals are overloaded as is. They don't have beds, and they're boarding in the ER, and there's wait lists from the ER to get admitted to the hospital, the big hospital systems, unfortunately, at times. People want their care in the communities. That's really where the good care is given, and really where the timely care is given. And unfortunately, I don't see the state wanting to do something different. That's just been my experience over the years. I think what you need to do is you need to push these big hospital systems more and more to let them know that we need the care in the community. Hopefully they'll listen, but some of them do, some of them don't. The other is that, quite frankly, we have a lot of the doctors that get hired who want to go with the specialties. Those more and more are done at big hospital systems, specialized, subspecialized. That's a national issue. A lot of rural places have difficulties getting doctors because they all want to gravitate to the big places. I think there's ways the state can do that. There's been efforts over the years. I know the State Medical Society has had a number of proposals, even working with the nursing associations, to see what we can do with people who get trained and try to encourage them to stay, but also go out into the quote unquote rural parts of the state, the community hospitals, those types of places. It's not an easy fix. Once you've created these big entities, it's tough to get them to stop because they have a lot of inertia.
I have no problem
So-
trying to make them stuff.
Right. Well, to be honest with you, they've reached out to me as a senator. They actually know who I am anyway. I think they already know what I'm going to be telling them when I'm in meetings with them, because I've been saying the same thing to them over years. But it really, you have to be pushing them and holding their feet to the fire. When you do, they actually do respond to a certain degree. I understand there are staffing shortages in certain specialties. Some of it also is, I think the state can do a better job, and I've been advocating for this, that when people are licensed in another state, Connecticut isn't always one of the most friendly states in this country to come in and reciprocate. I can tell you, I had to go through a process in Massachusetts long time ago to be licensed there. When I then had to get licensed in Connecticut, I thought it was going to be easy because they were already a massive file on me in Massachusetts. Nope, had to go through a very lengthy process. They actually didn't even care about anything that I was already licensed with in Massachusetts, already licensed with the Drug Enforcement Agency. So I think there are things that can be done. I served on the medical examining board for a number of years. Malloy appointed me to it, and I tried to push to change some of the processes with DPH, and DPH is very slow to want to change. Some of it just has to be legislation. And I think more and more, and it's just not in medical, I think a lot of licensed fields, there are things that can be done to streamline that process to get folks to come in or want to stay. But it's not an easy fix, but I think the more one just really, you have to keep on yelling and screaming. And I know Tammy can speak from that from experience. I've had behind the scenes meeting with Johnson about, at the meetings, talking with Johnson about keeping their feet to the fire for services they need to provide. I think the more they hear from the community, some of it is the state wanting to invest and encourage. I think there are some things the state can do. Whether the state wants to do it is a different story. There are some things I'm looking into with some colleagues, even on both sides of the aisle, to see what we can do through public health. There's 2 doctors in the legislature. Both of us are in the Senate. Both of us are on public health for obvious reasons. So I think there's a lot we can do to push. It'd be interesting. Also, I'm not on insurance committee, but I'm planning to see what I can do to push there as well, because there are various things that get done there with the insurance companies. I don't know how much you see it, but there are insurance sometimes pushes you in certain directions. Even behind the scenes, we feel that pressure. But if you push back, sometimes you can break through that. And I think there are ways to work through that as well. So I'm looking forward to a new vantage point to fight that fight. I've been fighting it for a while, but hopefully more and more in the communities, we'll hear people speak up. I can tell you when people were speaking up about Wyndham, the state actually heard that loud and clear. So did Hartford Healthcare. And now I can tell you people are really speaking up about potentially Dave Kimball getting bought out and closing certain services, such as labor and delivery. And suddenly now there's talk that no, there's going to be contracts or whatever with the state that they're not going to close. But it'll be interesting what the fine print says on that. But when people speak up more and more, the systems do here.
You didn't mention me, but,
I think you didn't mention it, I don't think. I'd love to hear from you.
Tim's like,
How much more do I add than the doctor add? But my concerns is that we have a process. In state of Connecticut that the hospitals are supposed to follow if they decide to close a care like
The specialty
Rockville
care.
did, right? Like
Yes.
Rockville did with some areas, and that never was resolved, actually, that they never got to they were said, this is what we're gonna go through, and the process never got, they didn't withhold their side. The hospital didn't withhold their side of what they were gonna do. They said that, so the Office of Healthcare Strategies, this is an executive branch office. And if they go through the process and the hospitals don't follow that, what they're saying, listen, we want to close our maternity wing. And they got a lot of pushback in Rockville years ago about closing that wing. And they're going to make some other changes, and they go and they ask the state if they can do this while they're actually doing the renovations to change. So and the state doesn't, and so either you penalize the hospital system, so between the process that we're supposed to have in the executive, we can put in legislation we have regarding insurance, and we can push that through the insurance company. We can probably do something on legislative, but it's also the executive branch. So we can tell them this is that you got to follow this process. But if the hospitals decide not to, they just keep doing what they're going to do, and there is no recourse by the state, then they're going to continue to do what they want to do. I think the insurance drives everything now, to be honest with you. If you look at, I know that when I go and get a procedure and it's this amount of money, and I realize that the provider is getting 25% of that because that's the agreement they signed on to for that. You look at what the insurance companies really are a driving force of a lot of this. I'm not in the expertise that he has, but just seeing what we've done and looking at the closings that happen. I know Yale's looking at picking up Manchester, whatever name, Prospect, Manchester, ECH, what name do they have right now? You know what I mean? So, and some of the people that are there that work there are happy about that because it's a localized, facility rather than Prospect, the big national one. So. I actually see that we have local offices, more smaller offices opening up in our communities also. So whenever I see a building that becomes vacant, I'm wondering what hospital is going to be moving into that and having, facilities there. So I don't think it's all bad. I am concerned about the hospitals and how they manage that, but I also want to make sure that an Office of Healthcare Strategy is actually following through. If a hospital goes and says, this is what our intentions are, and it's not approved, then make sure that the hospital maintains it. But then they go, we don't have the staffing. So they start cutting staffing. So there's a game that's being played by some of these hospitals. We don't have the doctors that come in or the nurses that come in and actually facilitate maternity or another care that might be a specialty care. So, but I don't serve on, I served on public health for one term and said, this is not in my wheelhouse, but don't put me in public health anymore. But I do try to get on each of the committees as possible. That's why I jumped onto labor this year to learn more about that. But I think there's work to be done, but I think it really comes down to the executive branch. Dr. Deirdre, what's Dr. Deirdre's? Gifford, right? She's now the head of, yeah, so we created a new umbrella over these services. So Dr. Gifford, I think, is a key to that. So that's going to be a new position. And let's hope that helps our healthcare. But I think, us speaking, but also the consumers speaking on behalf of themselves and saying, we want the services to stay in our hospitals.
Yeah, I mean, I just struggle to see what you can do legislatively to stop what's happening out there with all this consolidation.
All right, so that's kind of this is my wheelhouse, right? So first things first, Connecticut has an all-payer claim database, right? That all-payer claim database gets claim information from insurance companies all over the place, looks at Connecticut claims. Not all people input information into it. Right now, there's no teeth in the legislation that mandates them to. I think we have to put the teeth in the legislation to mandate it. What the all-payer claim database shows across the board is that in the state of Connecticut, there are lower instances of care at extremely higher cost per incident, especially after consolidation. If you look at any of the Hartford Hospital claim payer information, lower instances of care, which means less people are in the hospital getting care, lower visits across the board, but they're charging almost 100% higher, right? So they're not lowering their costs to adjust to the fact that they have lower instances of care, right? So what we're seeing from that perspective is what they're doing is they're having massive capital spends. They're getting this money and then they're building. I don't know about you, but when you drive around, which corner can you look at and not see a Hartford healthcare building,
That's right.
right? Beautiful brick building, great big beautiful windows, at least 2 to 4 stories high, right?
Yeah.
Majority of those, as Tim mentioned, go through a CON, which is a
Have to be approved.
certificate of need
Mhm.
program, right? They build them without even having a CON,
Right.
right? And then they come to go through the CON process. And, well, we've got it built, we have this, it's gonna be an ambulatory surgical center, it's gonna be a GI center, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that. So they're spending revenue on massive capital builds that tend to stay pretty empty, right? I don't know, the one down by Bob's, I don't know how many years it took to be built, how many years it took to be staffed, it's an oncology one, I still think, maybe wrong, last time I knew, maybe 1 or 2 providers were in that entire building, right? They're spending their revenue to build up capital, to have empty buildings. That's a problem. Part of that problem is that we have this CON process and the state of Connecticut fails over and over again. In that CON process, it says within 5 to 10 years of the CON being approved, there's supposed to be a review to see, did they do what they were supposed to do? Did they actually lower the cost of care? Did they improve quality? Did they improve all of these things? We don't do it. The AG in Rhode Island has created a task force across the board to start looking at their CONs and closing places that are not meeting what they said they were going to meet. They are breaking up monopolies that were supposed to be providing better care at lower costs that aren't doing it. So we need our AG to start doing that. We need our AG to start looking at this and actively pursuing review in the CON process to say, did you meet it? If you did not, then you cannot maintain a monopoly. What they also do, though, there was a big article in the paper last year where there was predatory practice. Hartford Hospital was sending out threatening letters to providers. If you do not join our provider practice, we will close you. We will put you out of business. It was like the massive investigation on it. I haven't heard anything at it legislatively. Haven't heard a single person peep about it. You've got providers who are basically being threatened. If you're not going to be in our network, then we're going to run you out of business, right? And then I'm in meetings with Johnson Memorial Hospital and they're saying, well, we only have 1 OBGYN. And when I said, okay, so how many providing OBGYNs does St. Francis have in the Northeast region over here within a 30-mile radius of Johnson Memorial Hospital? Why do they all not have practicing privilege? Why do we not mandate? They have practicing privilege. They're St. Francis providers in our area. So don't tell me you can't get an OBGYN to practice at Johnson Memorial Hospital because they're practicing providers. You mandate practicing privilege. They didn't even thought of that. They're literally writing it down as I said it, like they hadn't even thought of it. So when they're coming back and saying we've only got one provider because, nobody will practice out here, it's because you're allowing it, because you want them to all be pumped into Hartford, into the St. Francis Hospital. So we need to be more strict on what is actually allowed through the CON process and that we're following up on it. And if you're not meeting the promises, then you don't get to keep that. You don't get to keep that community hospital. You don't get to keep creating a monopolistic environment that is increasing the cost of healthcare with lower instances of care. That's one big thing. The other part of that too is from the insurance perspective. I disagree a little bit with some of the stuff because I work in the industry and I see it, but I also, because I work in the industry, I know where to look and where to poke at things. I'm proposing legislation that we do an entire task force on the pre-authorization. We hear about it all the time, right? I know stuff that we've done in industry to look at it to kind of maximize that, lessen the burden on it, but the burden only gets lessened for Hartford Hospital kind of places, like the independent providers, it's still a drain on them. So looking at the last decade of pre-authorization, what is pre-authorized? Were you able to show cost value for doing this and health outcomes? And if not, then we look at how we change that. And the last thing regarding that, healthcare cost is a big issue for me, right? Accessibility and affordability is a huge issue for me. And I can't tell you how many times I'm raising my hand saying this, you want to pass this legislation? It feels really good. It's going to raise the cost of care. It's going to raise the cost of care. And then you're going to yell and you're going to say insurance companies aren't evil. And you're not going to say, we did that. We did that by saying you have to do it at no cost because of PPACA, every time something goes in at no cost, it's an immediate increase to premium because there's only certain things mandated through ACA. Everything else has to be paid for 100%. It's all a continuum and people don't want to recognize that. So one of the big things we have to look at is the role the PBMs play because 24 to 26% of every healthcare dollar is pharmaceutical. How do we control that, right? Connecticut can't control that. We're 3.6 million people out of, or we're 331 million people out of 3.6 billion, right? Like it's not, we are not big enough to control that. The federal government has to control that, but there are things that we can do to make it uncomfortable for pharmaceuticals, but people have to be willing to take on that bite. I scream about it all the time, but I don't even want to say what my husband says about it, but it's kind of hard. You got to be big and loud and get everybody else to start yelling too. But we need to look at the role PBMs have been playing as the intermediary between pharma and insurance. And maybe that's another thing we break up. Like if it's a monopolistic environment that is creating higher cost care, I have my only care is more access and affordability. So if we have to push on that one, then we have to push on that one, but we have to learn the information first, get it and look at it. So I'm all over that one, but.
Well, I'm happy to work in your prior office. I'm actually working on a bill with some others.
We're probably going to disagree on that, Doctor.
We might.
But that's okay.
might.
We can
That's
figure
okay.
out, we can find a way.
Right, there are several aspects to prior authorizations that have to be looked at. That's a vexing problem.
But to your point, there's already a process for these closings and for CONs, as she mentioned, and office opening, that's just not followed. And they're not controlled by the agencies that are supposed to control them for whatever given reason. There's, like every other organization out there, they're understaffed, and they don't have the follow-up that they need to follow up on when the hospitals do certain things. And how do you then re-legislate what's already in legislation and already in processes for departments? It starts at our end. We could put, and I think, what do we do? We represent our districts and our people, but we put words in books. So we put words in books that people are supposed to follow, whether it's in the judicial branch or whether it's in the executive branch. If they don't follow them, all we can do is, put more words in books. And say, oh, now you really got to do it. It's really up to the people following what's already there.
Well, I agree. CON system has been broken for a long, long time. It's, I think basically, people just do, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, and they get away with it time and time again, or they get a little slap on the wrist with a fine, which for these big systems is nothing. And they get what they want, anyway. I personally think the whole Office of Healthcare Strategy needs a big revamp and a refocus on certain things. I think it's delving into things it should not be. And I think it's delving too much into certain patient care things that it doesn't have a role in, and it's losing sight on things that it should have a role in. And they only have so much staff, but then they dilute themselves in trying to do too many things. But that's, to me, that's a separate discussion we can have about that bureaucracy. I think there are things that can be refocused to do and try to do better than it is. But I think it gets into what the executive branch wants to do with it. But that is a broken process that has to be fixed.
But to answer your question, it's not gonna be good for our residents. It's not good for our residents right now. The consolidation that's happening, I don't know if you've spent any time in any of these hospitals, but I had a medical procedure and I had to go to Hartford Hospital after my procedure, and there's people literally underneath letters and hallways. I get my blood drawn in a chair in a hallway, but there was blood on the floor, like scattered. It's rough, like it's not good for our residents. When you don't have that small community hospital that you can go to get care, and you have to go into the cities, and that it's not gonna be good for our residents.
And I can tell you, despite what they say about COVID, and now we're dealing with the flu and RSV, yes, it made it worse, but this existed long before. I mean, I trained in the UMass system. And they're a level 1 trauma center, and they have, I think, 3 helicopters that can fly in and out. And they have a lot of patients that go there, but they built a brand new ER years ago, phenomenal. Soon after that, it became overloaded because you build it and people come. And literally, yes. So instead of having room numbers, you have room numbers and you have hallway numbers. So if you want to find somebody, you have to know, is that their room number or the hall number, because they're also there in the hall, because these systems are very, very overloaded. And you're right, when they shortchange the community hospitals, and then they shortchange in their ambulatory care settings and want certain things to go to the big hospitals, it's just overloaded. And there is money in outpatient care more than inpatient care, depending upon the service, so that they do build it. But sometimes the stuff they build is just way, way too much, and they have a lot of empty space. But sometimes they build it right. And if they build, like Hartford Healthcare in Plainfield, built an ER at the same place, they built a huge ambulatory care center. They built it right. And that part of the state needed another ER. And they did well with that. Sometimes they just build and build. But they don't build right. And that's one of the problems. If you're not building right, you still are shortchanging the service.
Should more follow up, if I may. Go for it. So it sounds to me like the certificate of need is really kind of the biggest problem, maybe? Is that accurate, you think?
It's certificate of need is a process, yeah. So there's a lot of cogs in that machine, right? And the CON is a big one. When you look at what's being allowed to happen or what's not, like there's some good from CON. Like when we were looking at the mental health bill, there were a lot of companies from other states that were looking to come in and buy a house and turn it into a rehab facility, or, like a care thing for this or that. They didn't have good results in the state that they were in. It was basically like a profit making. One company came in, bought a house, said they were going to do one thing, and then did something totally different with it because nobody ever went and checked on it until there were so many complaints, not only local people, residents and that, but medical complaints against it, that it was so loud, people had to go look at it. Right. So tightening down the CON process from that, saying, we were looking at providers that are coming from out of the state, and what are their records and what are they doing? And, how successful are they there? And do we need that in this particular area? The problem is CON process isn't theoretically bad. It's just not being it's not being taken care of correctly and it's not being followed up on.
Is there a committee that's supposed to do that?
It all falls under OHS, unfortunately. It falls under the Office of Health Strategy.
That's who oversees.
They oversee the approval or the denial, right? So when Wyndham Hospital wanted to close their maternity, they had to go through the CON process.
Mhm.
And they do a full review and they actually ended up denying that CON.
Mhm.
And saying, no, you can't because it's a community of need, right? Same thing with Johnson Memorial. Well, you know, when you're having those conversations, and no offense, when a man is telling me that it's perfectly acceptable if I'm in full-blown labor to get into an ambulance and drive for 40 minutes and hope that I don't have a baby along the way, you can't have that conversation with me. That is not a conversation that I'm listening to from you. Like, it's just not good. Like, there's just, it's a lot of, they denied it, right? Small community of need, a lot of Medicaid patients out there.
But there was a lot of community.
There was a lot of
And they
community.
actually had to
pushback.
listen to that.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's a process for it, but it's really just not being followed anymore through A to Z. So we're looking at that in the insurance committee. We've been looking at the CON process since I've been elected, since I've been in office, we've been looking at how can we put more teeth in it? How can we mandate the AG's office has to review it? What do we have to look at? What do we have to change to get it to be what it's supposed to be, which is really there to protect the resident. And it's kind of right now just more to help the big providers. So
It very much needs a revamp. And it does not really follow what it's supposed to be following, but there's been yelling and screaming over many years, and it really comes down to OHS. And what the executive branch wants to do with that.
but I look forward to working with Deirdre. I think, Deirdre has been really positive where she is. So I'm hopeful that, we work in insurance commission, we work really closely with OHS. Vicky Beltry was great when she was there. So I'm really hoping that Deirdre kind of creates that same sort of relationship with us and we can, call her on the fly and sit down and try to figure out how we can continue moving forward, not get sick.
So the governor appointed her to kind of be at an elevated level to oversee the healthcare in the state of Connecticut. So there is what is important is that he's identified that there is issues and is looking to invest in that. Not saying he's hiring more people, he's putting people at different levels and then, eliminating silos, so to say, with having a point person, so that everybody reports to her, what's going on, how can they better collaborate, and that there are people that are excited about this movement, so maybe that'll be part of the discussion, and maybe we need to drive that discussion, so that they are hearing from the communities, and the people being served. So.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Regan.
I just have, we've spent a lot of time, my mom's texting right now about insurance issues. How ironic, but I also work in healthcare too. I actually work for Prospect.
Yeah.
We're actually pretty excited about yield.
I heard, that's what I've heard from you. Yeah.
I don't see them really closing down the two hospitals. So we're excited because I think they're gonna invest in us. So I kind of feel a little, I guess, opposite of what you're feeling right now. So time will tell, but I understand the terminology you're using up here, because we hear it a lot from the person that runs the hospital right now, so.
It depends on what the hospital really wants and what its end game is. Some hospitals will do it and really want to invest in the community. Others
Maybe
don't.
Yale's a little different, because I think they're private, right? They're not like, they're more, I think they're different than Hartford Hospital and St. Francis. About-
In some of the ways they run, they are.
Yeah.
They're still one of the 800-pound gorillas, and they're still fighting for territory like Hartford Healthcare is very much so. But nevertheless, it depends on how they see the community. So I've seen systems come in and really want to invest in the community because they realize that, number one, it's the right thing to do, but number two, it's the right thing for the bottom line to do. And they can increase their business that way. Because there's a limit to how much business realistically you can increase year after year by shunting everybody to your big hospital. At some point, you max out your capacity and that's just it, unless you're going to build another massive big hospital. That's it. So some hospital systems do that right. Other hospital systems don't. Their goal is they come in, they quote unquote get that territory before their competitor does, but they just see it as we're going to start shifting things to more outpatient services that are profitable. And then the inpatient services that aren't, well, we already have an inpatient hospital, so just shunt the people there. So it's really the mentality. And I've seen Harvard Healthcare do both mentalities. I've seen Yale do both mentalities. I think the way is how do you encourage them to do the right mentality?
Right.
And to realize that investing in the community really is good for the bottom line. I mean, these are businesses.
Mhm.
So I'm mindful that they look at the bottom line, whether they say they're looking at what's right or wrong. It is, is matter for debate sometimes depending upon what they do. But at the end of the day, if it can be made profitable for them, especially if they're bringing patients into their system. When you bring patients into your system, they're using a huge amount of your system. And that's a lot of outpatient that gets used, lab draws, everything else. And so when they look at it that way, it depends upon how they really can crunch the numbers. I think what Yale is trying to do in that example would make sense. And I think to me, that would be a good move because I think they could really bring a lot of people into their system without having people have to go to New Haven.
Right.
And that's good overall for their system and it's good for patients. But it's not good when a big company wants to come in and say, look at Johnson Memorial and, we just want to get rid of X, Y, and Z and just go to our big place for those services. That's a very different mentality and that really never works.
Yeah, that's not good that they want to close up there because there isn't really much out there.
No, there really isn't too.
And they service a lot of area, like
Yeah.
not just like, exactly.
Yeah,
They
they do
have a lot
cross
of
the border.
Massachusetts that come down and you're talking like Union, Stafford, lots of geographical locations. Enfield and Summers, that's closing down a major. It's a small community hospital, but it's closing down.
But
for
they're
a while.
building more outpatient stuff because there is money in that.
Yeah, I work in outpatient for. press
Yeah,
time,
more and
so-
more. I mean, there's a lot of inpatient services that don't make money, but they're not designed to make money. I mean, for an example, an emergency department does not make money for a hospital's bottom line. It just doesn't. But you need an emergency department. You shouldn't be closing emergency departments. We actually need more emergency departments. Or more urgent/emergency department centers where there's hybrids. And those work as long as they have helicopter access. Those can work and they're good models. I wish Connecticut would do them more. But it depends on what services you want to maintain and what they really see they can drive. So for example, for Johnson Memorial, if you're losing some of those services, people are just going to have to go.
Right.
And that's not easy to do, especially if you're sick.
Mhm.
I can tell you as a cancer doctor, I have patients who are sick and I have to tell them, hey, you have a high fever, you have no immune system because I've given you chemo. I need you in the emergency room. You can't wait for my office to open after the weekend. And I'll admit you to the hospital. But if I didn't have that resource, I would have to send them either to Hartford or I have to send them up into Worcester. When you're sick and not feeling well, number one, that's not good to do. But number two, that's taking time that they may not have in order to get the treatment they need. So having that type of stuff in the community is very important. And not everything can be admitted to a community hospital for the type of cases. Sometimes you have to have a specialized care and go to a big hospital where that just has to be, or a big ICU setting. But there's a lot that can be done in the community. And a lot of people forget about it. I've been in meetings with hospital systems and argue that point to show me why certain things can't be done in the community when I know for a fact they can be. But a lot of the hospital systems just want to shunt that. So if you use the Yale model in your example, that they're looking to invest in the community, that's what you really want. I think there's ways the state can do it. Number one, they really need to put more teeth into the CON and actually use the teeth they have and hold the hospital's teeth to the fire on it. And not just give them a little pat on the wrist and say, oh, you did bad, do better next time. But also, I think there's ways to facilitate that shift in healthcare. More and more, there are in California, there are models being moved to try to push more and more out into the community because the big hospital systems are overloaded and can't really take on more cases. And in places like California and other places, states can do it, then why can't we in Connecticut? We have the smarts to do it and we have the infrastructure to do it. I mean, I tell people Connecticut should be proud. We rank massively high in this country for the quality of healthcare
Fourth.
and the quality of doctors, nurses, everybody else, let alone the training that gets done. We have phenomenal high quality training programs here. And there's no reason we can't be with all of that talent moving things better. It's really more the willpower to do it and really what the state can do to say no and what the state can do to say yes. I would love to see the CON process revamped. I think it's a bad process right now, and it just needs to be revamped and refocused and really told, and hopefully the executive branch will do this and do what it's supposed to do.
That's good.
And sometimes that's needing to hit people over the head when they're not doing things right with the hospital systems.
No, thank you, Councilman Murray. I think I saw you were looking to jump in.
Yeah, I have, you're all
You
set.
said jump.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right.
One of the things I heard all each of you talk about was about partnership with the communities. And I guess, what can we do as a town council to partner with you better?
Thank you for that. I was going to ask, I think the main thing is, so. Again, our focus is, what are the needs of your community? Your constituents, our constituents, right, are gonna tell you what their needs are. Maybe it's something, but what is it that we've strapped you with that is like, this has got to go? And can we adopt that? You know, there's legislation on zoning coming up again this year. There's gonna be different legislations that's gonna come up, and we want to hear from you. So I think that's the thing, is you see a piece, and I know it's not easy to follow legislation. There's, 20+ committees, right? And they're at everything, public hearings and stuff like that. But you do have resources, whether it's CCM or cost or whatever that's out there, it's going to let you know what's going on. And then we become your partner in supporting it and or opposing it. So I think that's where we really got to be your advocate. I mean, the value that, you have is 3 legislators essentially for Tolland, in which most small towns don't have that. I mean, a couple of my towns don't have that luxury, but Tolland does. So, and we serve on, I don't think any of us serve on the same committee.
Appropriations.
So that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a minor approach, to be honest with you. So, but for the most part, we serve on different committees. We're going to see the legislation that's going to come out. That you would either want to, depending on if it's on the environment, whether it's on healthcare strategy, whether, whatever it may be on, more on foundations. I don't think we're doing much more with foundations, maybe tweaking something, but the water well issue, that could be something that we need to champion and try to get done. And that might be a partnership with the community, to be honest with you. If it's a joint funding thing, whatever it may be, but I don't know. But I think it comes from having this dialogue, and thank you for the invitation, because that's important. I don't know if communities do that. I'm going to reach out and say, listen, I got to meet with Tolland.
Yeah.
How about here? Because most of the communities that I serve are very similar to Tolland in terms of, you're a little bit larger, more services than the others, but I think it's listening to you, whether it's, Brian in his office and, hey, this is, but that's the key, is having an open email / door policy, whatever it may be, that, this legislation is coming up, and how do you feel about it? And is it something that we need to support and or oppose? So on your behalf, we work for your constituents too, so.
And absolutely, I can tell you as a town official, I very much try to champion in that role, working with the legislators and also with Courtney in our congressional delegation overall, but also I've always been a big fan of getting out about in the community. I do that heavily in my town as a town official. That's the way I learn and know what's going on and be able to tell people what's happening and get their input. As a state senator, I want to continue doing that. Now I have 13 towns, so I'm used to driving all over the place, and I have some diverse towns. We have Tolland, is Vernon. Then I have this, I think the smallest populated town, which is Union. What, 700, 800 people. Their population never seems to grow when you look at it year after year. I don't know how they do it, but so there's diversity out there. But the more that I can hear from you, more I can hear from Brian, from other agencies and boards, and I do that for all the towns. And I've been reaching out and meeting with folks in all of my towns. I may not be able to make every single meeting every month. I'm realistic, but I want to hear, and I'm happy to give you my contact info. I don't mind getting texts and all sorts of things. I'm used to it already. as is, but the more I can hear about things big and small, the more informed I can be, but also the more effective I can be. And not just by myself, but really working with others. And just not working with others in my caucus or working with Tammy and Tim, and I very much look forward to working with them in my new role, but really working with whoever. Regardless of politics, I understand politics comes up, but still, there are things that we can do, really looking at public policy. For people, that's what's gotten me involved in all these years in town, and what has me involved now as a upcoming state senator. So I really would encourage you to let me know. If I already know about it, great. Sometimes I hear a different perspective. If I don't know about it, I really would like to. But the other thing I want to do as well, and I'll leave this out there for all of you guys, including town government, is I do want to get out and about as much as I can in the towns, because that's how I learning from people outside of town hall. At events, meeting with people, talking with people, small businesses, that type of stuff. I'm always happy to partner with you guys on that. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I can leave you my contact info, and always happy to hear from you. That is an open door policy, and I do my best to get back to people as quickly as I can.
So, with me, I'm always here, but everybody in this room has he's laughing, everybody here has my cell phone number, but, I know that elections can get kind of too contentious at points in that, but, at the end of the day, we're all here for the community, right? And for me, I don't even pretend that I know everything about everything. It's very important for me to hear from other people and their perspective on things. Like a piece of legislation can be coming forward, and if I don't hear from anybody, then I don't know, right? You can only do your best to guess. I reach out to people when there's stuff that comes up on the floor that I don't know about. I'm texting people at 11 o'clock at night, what does this mean to us? How is this going to work for Tolland, or how is this going to work for Wellington? I have some people who are very willing to sit down and partner. Like I don't care about the political party at this point. It's done. I have 25,000-ish people. I represent all of them, right? And that doesn't mean that we're always all gonna agree, but if I don't at least know what the issues are with something, I don't know how to fight it or get the information or figure it out, right? So it comes down to really open communication. I am always open to sit down and talk to anybody about any topic that is important to them, or they feel like they want me to know their perspective on. So if legislation comes forward, I know kind of where the road is in front of me and how I can try to navigate that. I have reached out to all of the Board of Eds also. We're going to be meeting with some of them. These guys will tell you the way I'm like sending emails to everybody. Here we are, talk to us. Vernon has been great. Like they are going to get me the top 10 most egregious state mandates that they're unfunded, that they have to deal with in the school system. I've had one of the Board of Ed members in Tolland get back to me with some of that. My thing is all too often, Katie, we hear, it's the mandates, it's this, it's that, but nobody will ever quantify. Tell me which dragon you want me to fight, right? Because you can't just say state mandates, because there's about 385 of them and the Board of Ed alone, right? I can't fight 385 dragons, but if you give me the top 10, I can pick 5 and I can go after them, right? But that's open communication with the elected officials that are in the rooms who want to, again, not care about any of the political crap and just do what's right for the community. So that's what I ask for. I'm asking for partners. You tell me, like, that's why I said to Steve, I'm like, let's have this meeting again. Tell me what's important to you. I can sit there and I can understand what comes before us. But even there, I'm sitting in a chair listening to people, right? In this chair, it's different. I need to know, like, what dragon do you want me to fight? Tell me, point me in the direction. Because that's how we make it better for all the residents. Communicate, just tell me, talk to me, and tell us where we need to be pointing our energy. And honestly, if you give me your phone number, you're gonna get a text at weird hours of the night when we're on the floor saying, what he's not gonna be, he's gonna get a lot. Like, what does this mean? How is this gonna affect us? Because like I say all the time, right? As a legislator, every bill that comes before me, the very first thing I consider is what does it do to my 25,000? It can be something that everybody's telling me is the greatest thing in the state. But if it's gonna screw over my 25,000, I'm a no. find a way to make it work where you're not gonna hurt my residents. Right? So my 25 is always my first priority. And then after that, it's the rest of it. So I just need to know, I need to know that I can text you, you can text me, you can tell me, Tammy, I want you to look at this, this is what we need for priority, then I'll do it, right? Like, I don't care about the rest, but I'll do it, just give me the dragon to slay.
Well, I think, I appreciate all that, so thank you. And, from our group, as a town council, we have a set of goals and objectives that, we've been working on and working towards. Some, we're much more successful than others, right? Like, it's proven contaminated wells cannot be solved by the 7, 8 of us with Brian in the last 12 months. That didn't happen, and I don't think anyone expected it to. But we do have a set of priorities and objectives. I know, Tammy, that you have them, obviously, but if Jeff and Tim don't, maybe Brian could get them over. This is where we're prioritizing as a council, and we can use some help and support with some of them. So I think crumbling foundations, contaminated wells, those have all been mentioned before me, and for very good reason, because those are humongously impactful issues that hit our residents right where they sleep, right? So it's very important. But we have a number of other ones. We have a fire station that we're trying to work our way through. We have ADA accessibility in our green. We have recreation issues, like we have a turf field in our upcoming capital budget. The original turf field was paid for in a large part by a state grant. My understanding is there's nothing in the works to get another state grant for its replacement. That could be a huge help to our town. We work with a lot of regional agencies that continue to need state support, or they need to be dissolved, and an effective agency needs to come in to help with, I don't know, Chamber of Commerce issues, all sorts of various things where we can be more we can utilize more regional efficiencies. We know we have housing related issues that in a large part are being driven from the state level. An 830G takeover of different developments is something that we as a community have recognized is a threat, and we're trying to address it. But 830G is a state law, right? And so that's something that's important to us. We have, like everywhere else, we have a mental health crisis. We have a task force working on that, but help from our state delegation on that is important. There's some simple things, right? Right now, we are permitted by state law to have remote meetings. I believe that sunsets at some point.
No. I
No,
don't
it's
think
not.
it does. I think they passed it in perpetuity, didn't they, last session?
I think so you have your own
You guys can decide.
government.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can.
You can just continue it as long as really you want.
Yeah.
Because that's my understanding. That's what we do in my town.
Okay,
That's our.
and that's great, like,
But we could check on. that.
yeah,
Sure that-
checking on that to make sure, because
I mean,
Councilor Luba is, we
participating.
want him to participate, right, but is doing it from home tonight, and there are days I have to do that. I'm, for whatever reason, we'd like to be able to do that. This is a
But I
really
think
bad
that-
example, but we do often have a lot of people who participate, our citizens who participate remotely too.
And I think that, those are things that, put a little list on these things and say, part of it is, we need legislation for this. Now, if it's a bonding thing as the, make sure that, you put in the bond request, right? Your town puts in, if there's, and please let us know so we can write a letter of support and why we need that, that, whatever it may be.
Grant requests.
Yeah, so, grant requests, so please, if you do that, let us know about it. We, what I find out is that, hey, I see our project isn't on the bond, and I go, you're telling me after the bond meeting, why didn't you tell me, that I don't sit on finance and I'm on a bond meeting, so, I might not see that, so the fact that if we're aware of it, that we can reach out and say that this is an important project for our community, that it makes that we support it. If it's some of the other things that you're bringing up, if it needs legislation, some of it doesn't need legislation, but if it does, that we team up and put in a piece of legislation on it and then, get it directed and we ask for support for it. So, and it may be in a bigger, some of your things you have bigger concerns with,
Sure.
no, it's in a bigger,
Yeah.
that's a statewide thing,
Yeah.
so. Zoning is a key component to what may have, you mentioned 830G, so, how does that, typically most of our towns are okay unless we, some of the new zoning things that are coming out could change the dynamics of your community.
Sure.
So we just need to know what those are that we can work on, and we're there to do that.
And I've been very active over the years with what's gone on in the legislature with zoning,
Yeah.
especially being chair of planning and zoning for so many years. 830G does not work. No matter how much the state tries to make it work. It's an old law. It just does not. There were efforts last session to try to revamp it. It just didn't go anywhere. The legislature took a different tact. I didn't fully agree with some of what they wanted to do, and I was vocal about it. There are ways that they can do better with 830G. It does really need to be updated and revamped. And the other is, quite frankly, I've said this in testimony, the state really shouldn't be, from a zoning point of view, with some of what it's trying to do, trying to pound a square peg into a round hole. It does not work, and it's not a one size fits all for 169 communities. And in each community, each town, there's different parts, as we all know. So there are ways to do. I'm looking forward to working with some folks to propose some bills to see what we can do. I'm not on planning and development. I just did not get that one, although I was looking to it to see if I could. But nevertheless, I'm going to be working with folks on that committee on some of the issues. I think there are things that can be done, but one that gets back to partnership. The state has not done a good job, I believe, on some zoning issues, especially affordable housing, really trying to understand what happens in each of the 169 municipalities. It just does not. It thinks it does, but it just doesn't. I'm fond of saying that most of the folks in the bureaucracy who are trying to tell us what to do in Woodstock probably have no idea what Woodstock is. They think we're Woodbridge or Woodbury, let alone not knowing where we are.
My son lives
so-
in town.
Well,
Does it goes through there with my mom?
however, like for a town like for Woodstock, we're not going to have big affordable housing development. I mean, we don't have public water, public sewer, public transportation, much the way of jobs. Really no street lights or one traffic. I mean, there's really no developer's going to build, even though we've, in our regulations, tried to be proactive to try to encourage things. The market isn't there for that. But are there things that I think the state should do? And I've testified a lot on this, and I've done this in my town. The state looks at affordable as capital A, which is whatever it defines. Those are very strict definitions. But there's affordability with a little a, which is what's really affordable in the communities. That's actually not so much the state's per se, other than if you're getting into tax policies and other things. That's actually what the towns are doing. As far as land management, things like that, the state really should facilitate letting the towns do that and partner with them, as opposed to coming down from above and saying, this is what you're going to do in Tolland, whether you like it or not. So I'm hopeful that maybe we can do more to prevent some of that, but also see what to do to really move that in a better direction. There was a good effort last session, and there's an effort building up right now. And I've been speaking with some of my colleagues who are going to populate planning and development on some of that type of stuff. So hopefully, but if you have any ideas, and I know you're planning and zoning commission chair well, so I've talked with them a lot about these issues, but I can tell you each one of my towns has a slightly different take on it, and that's good. And that's what we want the state to hear, which is let you guys know best what's best for your town. And I believe that. And we just need to encourage the state to move more in that direction. So it'll be interesting. I think it's going to be interesting what gets proposed this session.
Well, I'd like to see if you could forward the, your objectives to myself, I would.
Yeah, I'd love to
And see how
see
that
that.
may fit into a type of legislation. You know, we have to get our legislation in. The second Friday, after we go in. So we get going on it right now, the portal's open.
It is.
So we can start submitting stuff, at this point. And, at least get it in the works. And then, there may be some, positions that cost or CCM is gonna be out there that you agree with, that you said, yeah, let's get behind these, so.
Well, I personally have seen a lot of great advocacy from our town manager, so I'm sure you will continue to hear from him on our behalf and on our residents' behalf.
Look forward to that, because that's important.
Yeah, it is, and he's doing a pretty good job, so.
I only ignore his phone calls every now and then.
You know,
You tried today. It didn't work. Good try.
I was in a meeting.
thank you.
Tim, Tommy, and Jeff. Thank you for your time and thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
And honestly, that's my first time hearing a politician. It wasn't boring, it was to learn a lot and interesting. This is my first term. So I don't know much about the process, everything else. You talk about process. I do understand there's a process for everything. But when it comes to public need, like town of Tolland, public well water. So I think there should not be a process. There should be a well priority on the priority list. So whatever we can do on your side, it would be much appreciated because it's been a while that the problem has been going on, and especially in your town too. So like there should be a little bit priority rather than a process, so there should be cut the red tape and keep moving. I think that would be, that's to me is like, as I said, I'm not a career politician, I'm just a normal guy from outside of this room.
You're sitting in that seat though, so guess what?
You're a politician, honey.
You're I like to say statesman of myself, but I have to wear the other tag too, so, but I think that, listen, some high level people in this administration know about this issue,
Mhm.
very high.
I call them regularly.
And we have their ear, now we need action. So, if that's the key, and what DPH, Department of Health, or what, Mark Bowen or whoever decides what they're gonna do or how they're gonna address it. Even if a plan comes together, I don't think it's an overnight plan too, but, and process to get it together, but, that people know of it, it's just, getting to action. It took, if you go back to just crumbling foundations. When it came to light, how long that took to come to a resolution on a large scale, which it did, so we're dealing with clusters and, because of, the way that their land is, ledge or whatever it may be that doesn't allow, for regular penetration, but also, some of the town's gotta take ownership too. The contamination probably came from what was put down on the roads and, so, but regardless of whose it is, we've got to get to a resolution on it. That's what it is. And then whatever it may be for the good of your constituents, Wellington, some localized, we know where the problem is in Coventry, it's right next to the salt contaminant storage area.
It is, everybody knows it, but it's all talks. But
Hmm.
where we heading, nowhere.
Yeah, what do you do, what can we do about it other than, you know, a water
Oh.
system, a true water system, right?
So.
Yeah. We
My,
can get water from Ellington to Yukon.
I know,
You
right?
gotta be able to get it to Merlot and Chardonnay way and, you know, what, you know, so, you know what I mean? We got it from Ellington to,
10 mile stretch and,
Yeah.
but,
right?
Don't
Yeah.
talk to Sammy about that. Oh my God, that main route.
number two, I know it's all talk, beside that, nothing else,
Mhm.
doesn't go nowhere. My couple more concern, my concern is like, senior in this state of Connecticut, than me telling 75 years old, you know what? If you can afford to live in Connecticut, move to South Carolina, Florida. How can we help them to stay put, especially nowadays, inflation, everything else? They'll put a coffee on the table, pay the tax on time or whatever it is, anything, anyway, any other way of, to help them,
To keep people here?
yeah, to give them.
Well, I mean, you,
As they-
how
you
it
know,
goes, so people make financial decisions for themselves, right?
I know, but like they are teachers, they are retired, they don't have pension, some of them don't have social security, but they have a limited income and everything else.
Yeah.
But it's a tough time for them.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't, so if. Our biggest concern is the people's largest bills for most people and their seniors is healthcare costs. And your, you know, and your property tax, right? Those are two biggest things, right? After, when you paid off your house, you paid off your car, you get a retirement, property tax and healthcare costs, right? You guys, you know, with the state's help, could do something about that, where we've looked at, there's a similar thing called homesteading act, that you live in your house for 25 years and you're 65 years old, and no longer do you have increases in property tax, so it's leveled off, so you don't have to pay anymore, you've done. How long do you have to pay taxes on a home that you've lived in for 25 years, right? So there's actions like that can be, there's things on a state level, that we tax everything in the state of Connecticut. So you look at, estate taxes, or if you look at gift taxes and things like that, somebody might want to, help their children, and we have a gift tax, the only state in the United States has a gift tax, actually taxing a gift that you give to your children if it's over a certain amount. So those are areas that I believe that the administration is looking at too, and has been looking at. And I'm happy to see about that. They're looking at, hey, listen, why is one of the richest person, or one of the top people in Greenwich takes his wealth and moves to Florida, and he's the richest person in Florida. If you think about that, the person in Greenwich, Connecticut lives and moves to Florida, he's actually the richest person in Florida, was at the time. Because he was done with it. He was done with, so much of his wealth going into the state of Connecticut's coffers. So we got to look at how we keep those that have invested so much in Connecticut. Pension, we're actually finally taking care of that. And we're going to start to reduce tax on pensions. Another 5 states, only 5 states tax pensions and Social Security. It's Connecticut. So those are the things that why people get up and say, "You're taxing my pension. I'm not going to stay." So those are things that we can do and we can address. We just got to get partners throughout this, in the whole chamber to say that. Because we kind of like our money in the state too, right? So those are the areas that seniors will take up and lead for. We have a great quality of life here in Connecticut, but if you can't afford it, as you mentioned, you got to go someplace where you can afford it. So those are things that we've worked on. I've submitted legislation multiple times on most of those, and they don't even get a committee hearing.
Mhm.
But I think this administration, from what I'm hearing, is looking at, hey, let's keep our seniors here. Let's start to reduce the taxes on pensions and Social Security. Right? We're doing it for churches. Been doing it for teachers. Now let's do it for more people. At all income levels. Mainly the lower income levels, but that people that have a smaller. So we're fixing it. We have legislation that's being submitted by our caucus again this year. That changes, especially one of them for teachers. I can go on and throw 11 o'clock. You guys want me going on, but those are great questions, and those are what we need to submit, but we also need to get those over the finish line, start to reduce. To keep our seniors here, you know, that, and I say seniors, I mean, those that have discretional wealth, right? If you've retired, you got a pension, you gotta stay here, they can spend their money anywhere. Let's have them spend it here in Connecticut on goods and things for their grandchildren, not to support the state coffers, you know, so start to reduce taxes on seniors in the state of Connecticut. I put that legislation in for over a decade. I'll continue to put it in this year. I know that our caucus is submitting that type of thing too, so,
Okay,
Yeah.
and my
but good question though, thank you.
last question is, Jeff. The state of Connecticut, like Massachusetts stopped selling menthol cigarettes. And the state of Connecticut was trying to do the same thing last session, but it didn't go nowhere. How, as a small businessman, that's my, trying to understand myself. We can ban the menthol cigarette, but we can allow other things, and as of January 8th, and I think anybody, you don't have to have a medical card, but anybody can walk up to dispensary and buy whatever they wanted. But they are going to pay, I think, 35% tax extra, but they can buy whatever they wanted. But at the same time, we can promote to ban menthol cigarettes. Is there logic to it? Or is it-
Well, there's logic to it when you look at why the state wanted to allow for marijuana sales, because there's money in it. It's big money. It's interesting because, well, first of all, as a doctor, I can't advocate people using it because I have to follow federal law. My drug enforcement agency certificate bans me from being involved with it, and the feds list it as illegal. With that said, anything any state doesn't protect you from whatever the feds want to do. The feds aren't enforcing it, which is interesting because the feds realize there's big money in some states. They haven't legalized it fully, but I think that's eventually going to come as more and more states push the feds in a certain direction. With that said, you know, that bill for marijuana that got passed, the cannabis, that's a monster bill. That is a huge bill. I've read it multiple times. Has very little with zoning, but because it just lets the towns do more or less what they want to do with zoning. There's a huge amount in that bill other than just sales and the state getting licensing fees and taxes and municipalities being able to tax. There's a lot of other stuff in that bill, which what ends up happening with the money the state gets. But the real reason, the logic behind it was the state saw a lot of money in it. Now, granted, there's been more and more push in society to legalize marijuana in various states. But really, if you look at what I think drove Connecticut was the money. And there were analyses on how much money the state could make. I mean, if you want to set up a commercial cannabis, whether it's micro cultivating, whether you want to sell it or be a hybrid, just look how much money you have to spend and how much you have to give to the state and licensing fees and things like that, just to see about, you know, being able to do it. So it is a big moneymaker for the state, and that was put into some budget planning. With that said, you know, yes, the state does get money off of cigarettes, but over the years, it's been raking in less money. Because it just, you know, because even though it taxes it more and more, the data shows that as the taxes have gone up in various states, the volume of sales overall have gone down. But that's a different way of what the state's trying to do with cigarette sales. But, you know, is there any logic between, you know, allowing certain cigarette sales to happen? And cigarettes are harmful. Alcohol can be harmful to people depending upon what they do with it. It really just comes down to the logic of money. And that's really, in my opinion, what drove a good amount. And look what's going on in places like Colorado. I mean, it's big business, very big business.
So when you said cigarettes, do you mean the menthol cigarettes or the flavored cigarettes or cigarettes?
Yeah,
itself?
you have those flavored ones. Yeah,
Flavored
ones
yeah,
are-
so
they try
obviously
kids.
it's all about children.
Yeah.
I mean, that legislation's all about the kids and the flavors and, you know, and everything. And so I was one of the driving forces to raise the age of 21, so don't get mad at me, but because and Senator Flexer teamed up to push that and push it and push it and finally, because I just think if you don't smoke until you're 21, you may never smoke, but but obviously they're looking at flavors. I think they try to follow California law a lot of times in terms of banning certain things because of the children, kids getting involved. But you make a fantastic point about, if we think that kids in high school aren't gonna be smoking more marijuana than they do now, then because of our legislation, which I didn't support. Maybe because the bill is just so bad. But it's unmanageable. That's why you find that their commissioner of Department of Consumer Protection stepped down or is leaving. The person that put the program together is also gone, that put the whole marijuana plan together. She's gone. So it's just gonna be, we're just gonna roll this out in a hurry. It's not gonna go well. But to your point, it's a good question you're asking. I think it's all because we don't want the younger people to get involved with smoking at a young age.
It was the same with vaping, with all the different things that they were marketing it for younger kids.
Right.
If you are smoking a Newport, I don't think so you're gonna put smoking Newport and you're gonna smoke something. Massachusetts people, you can buy Newport under the counter. You can buy under the counter, but you cannot buy it legally. Strawberry Spring Union, a lot of people come from Massachusetts and they buy it over there. So it's like you cannot stop them. But at the same time, buy that product, and the state is going to make money. But ask me if I care about if your mind is messed up, whatever it is. So it's
Right.
like, to me, it's like I cannot take it if the person is standing right next to me, buying a pack of cigarette and he just smoke whatever from outside, I cannot stand it. I cannot stand that smell. I have to step up.
Sammy, the problem is the state of Connecticut is ridiculous about it. I actually got into a public disagreement with the head of finance last year because they were trying to pass the vaping bill, like to ban vaping, flavored vapes, right? And I told him point blank, the bill was asinine and they were a bunch of hypocrites. Because the state of Connecticut gets $150 million a year from the tobacco settlement. They have been getting it for over a decade. They also get about $300 million a year from the cigarette tax. And when we got the $150 million a year settlement from the tobacco settlement, Jody Rao and Blumenthal actually were very public in saying this money has to be used for educational purposes and to offset the healthcare costs of people with damages from cigarettes. Ask me how much money the state of Connecticut has spent in the last 15 plus years out of $150 million a year.
I know.
Go ahead, ask me. Less than $30 million.
We robbed
You know where that
Basic
money
things.
is? God knows. I've asked and I keep asking. Last year, I
Goes into
pushed
the
and
general.
pushed and pushed. Actually, it's not in the general fund. It's an it's an off account.
We've stolen from that to
Yes.
fund the general fund.
Exactly, but it's accounted for in an off books account, which had to be explained to me on the floor because I don't understand an off books account as an accountant. It's called a slush fund. Or it's called, something that's put off someplace that nobody else knows about and they can do whatever they want with. The CDC recommends we spend $32 million a year to offset the $57 million a year that the tobacco industry spends in the state of Connecticut. I fought last year, spoke to the Speaker of the House specifically to try to get the $32 million minimum that the American Heart Association and the CDC recommends that we spend in the schools to educate kids and people to not smoke. We got 12 million, maybe 13 million for the first time that I think in legislative history that we're actually allocating money towards educating people about smoking instead of trying to pass a law that is a legal substance in the United States to ban it to help children. Let's just spend the money the way we're supposed to spend the money. Let's just actually use the $150 million a year to educate people on why they should not be smoking or vaping. Put it in the school system. We don't do it because nobody holds anybody's feet to the fire. So I'm putting in legislation that is to spend the money that's on there in the place that we're supposed to, which is education. It's not banning a legal product. It's educating people on why they shouldn't be smoking or vaping or what it does to kids when they start doing that. But the state of Connecticut hasn't made it a priority. They've instead made it a priority to put the money in some black account off to the side and nobody asks about it. I'm asking, been asking. So hopefully we'll have more money to do education on it rather than looking at banning one specific part of an entire legal product. Even though I can't stand smoking, it's horrid. But you know what? It's a legal product. So if more legislation comes up to ban just menthol flavored, I will be the person who was saying this is an asinine bill and you are a hypocrite for not spending the money the way it's supposed to be. A little rash, but that's my take on it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your service. And thank you all for coming. I don't know if there's a second round of questions. I just want to touch a little bit quickly though on Councilman Murray's comments about the fire station. I did email over to you guys the council goals, so you can see, I know Councilman Nuccio sees them frequently, but yeah, in terms of the firehouse project, it's something that Councilor Luba and I are both on a subcommittee for. Unfortunately, a lot of factors, inflation, maybe the timing and the pricing wasn't entirely accurate. Maybe the long-term vision for the firehouses wasn't as clearly laid out, but unfortunately, we put forward 3 firehouses to be replaced. At this point, the costs, we're going to be able to replace 1, refurbish a second, and the third, which is probably closer to state request for aid because it has a crumbling foundation, is Station 140, which is off of Crystal Lake. So I think down the line, not maybe urgent, but something to keep in the books. I know Brian's keeping it in the back of his head too, is that, we're gonna have to keep doing core samples, see how it's doing, see how it's faring out. It's not critical, but at some point that's gonna be replaced. And I think it being a crumbling foundation issue, it should be with some assistance from the state, helped out. And I think overall, I think the seniors, well water issues, affordable housing, I think in part is getting state and federal funds provided to Tolland. Like I said, we can get the 10 miles from Ellington to Yukon. Why can't we get something down to 74 to Wellington?
Right.
To help spur economic development. I mean, there's parcels right across from the troop barracks, and the troop barracks has water quality issues that are ongoing. Getting economic development at the same time solving for people's water quality issues. So I think that's another focus for Tolland. I think for the region is, if the state wants us to have more affordable housing and have a diverse stock, we need infrastructure to support it. So any efforts that you can provide to work with state and federal leaders to get funds to Tolland to actually support that, especially Tolland is one of the few communities left in probably the state, maybe even the region, that has a municipally owned water company. That's probably going to get sunset at some point in the future. It's been brought up in the past. It's something they continue to hem and haw about, but at some point the town might want to get out of the water business and find a buyer. And at what point will they then take on the responsibility? If it was be sold and we don't have the water issue fixed in the vineyards or other parts of the town, is Connecticut Water going to be doing that, or will the legislature hold them to the fire to do expansions through either a carrot or stick approach? So that's just one thing I want to impress upon you 3. So, but again, thank you for your time, and any response you want to provide is appreciated.
Thanks for what you do, and look forward to working with you, continue to work with you, and we'll be talking a lot. Right down the hall from me, so.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, they moved.
They're moving me. I'm
They
going
moved
down
you,
to the
that's
second
right.
floor. I get a room with a window now.
Oh, wow.
I
So really,
know.
you.
Mr. Chair, can I run through a couple
I'm
things?
still waiting to find out.
Yeah, no, we can't run without you.
All right,
Hit me with your best shot, bro.
I will not. Thank you, offer. Thanks, you guys. Good luck in your coming 2 years here. Well, certainly your success will be ours. Some of the main things, without just rehashing the foundations, obviously, getting the bond commission to put that extra 75 million on the agenda, obviously, and honoring that is critical to so many here in Tolland and the success of however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
The salt issue, obviously, and I'm real curious as to what state direction there was to switch from sand to salt, that pretty much everyone did, and how that happened. And how that's gonna play out in the future. We talked about public safety. Obviously, I don't hear too much about shootings and homicides here in Tolland. What I do hear about is traffic safety. And the roads and anything you can do to get funding for that, and funding for more troopers, as that's our police right now, to increase more presence in the streets. 5 people killed over that we get in West Hartford from either pedestrian or motor vehicle accidents. The problem in every town, we still have a woman in very serious condition as a result of a pedestrian accident over the summer. So that would be, I think, one of our most pressing public safety needs. The educational cost sharing grant obviously is a big thing. Do you, I'm assuming you guys get the CROG and CCM legislative priorities. Okay, so much of this is contained therein, and many of the things that Katie actually brought up are listed in these as well, and the extended producer responsibility in regards to waste management was a key, it became political in CCM, I believe, in discussions with them, but that talks a lot about producer responsibility in the waste and packaging, as the senator had brought up. So I would ask that you keep some eyes on that, as well as in regards to protecting our environment and reducing costs for recycling. Lastly, obviously, it's been a brutal decade in regards to polarization within politics. So anything that you three can do to help quell that and to really try to unify everybody and bring everyone together, be it through rhetoric, be it through listening and any social media, stuff like that. Anything you can do to level and calm everybody down and bring them together. I myself personally certainly would appreciate. And that's really all I have. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brian. You guys want to respond or provide any additional feedback?
The one that more troopers, I think is gonna be a focus, we have it's hard to get, that's your wheel, your background, but, I think that's gonna be important, that we build, when I saw the last number, I don't know if the number was only 840 state troopers in the state of Connecticut. I believe the number that we had at a minimum base at one time was about 1,200 that we were supposed to maintain in the state of Connecticut. I could be off on those numbers, just something I just read for research. So that's an area that we need to bolster, I think. And then, I know years ago, the state, if I was there, and supported, but we put a lot more of the cost back onto the towns to cover the cost of troopers that hurt town budgets, obviously. So maybe the state can look back at reversing some of that, or how we help fund our troopers areas. ECS and maintaining that. I think the other area that I wanted to bring up is that when we spend a lot of money on individuals that need extra support in schools, and we look to the state doesn't completely fund that portion of the education system that we're supposed to fund. In the states also feet to the fire on funding that. So to help in the community. So when you brought up ECS funding,
Yeah, that's either in the CROG or the CCM with that additional point, not just the ECS stuff that you talked about, the special needs, it's a two-pronged approach. So thank you.
if we just fulfilled our obligation on that, it would save the town a lot of money, because as you know, it's a huge percentage of your cost in education, about 20% in some cases go, and listen, we want to make sure we take care of the students, but we also, in the states required is to pay that. We just haven't really fully funded that portion of the education. So we should make sure that we look at that. Thanks for bringing that back up, though, the funding component of it.
So bond commission, you know how much fun that is to deal with. Still working on that. But yes, we have to get that money allocated for the crumbling foundations. Wells, in regard to the switch from salt to sand to salt, I actually have the 2007 report that was put up. I can send that to you if I don't remind me, but I have the 2007. It was a hard report to get my hands on, but that the state used to make the push for all the towns to go from sand to salt. And again, a lot of the science that was in that has since been proven to be faulty, especially in areas like they didn't look at. The whole assumption was that the salt was going to filter through the sand, the dirt and the sand, and not ever reach the wells. So it didn't look at any topographical, any kind of variation incidents from any town. So I do have that. Remind me, and I'll send it to you.
We have on retainer an attorney and a consultant that I think would like to see that report.
Remind me, I'll send it to you, because I have it, I have at least, I have
Thanks,
portions
Timmy.
of it. Public safety, you know, I'm passionate about that. We have to find a way to try to get more people who want to be police officers, and it's not the field that people want to go into. I think the contract that's gonna be coming out is gonna be helpful. The contract change is gonna be helpful, but we have to kind of change the mentality and the rhetoric that people have around, police. And the road safety is very important. You know, as well as I know, when we have, you know, 2/3 of what we should have for a force, and they're getting domestics, and they're getting larcenies, and they're getting all these other things, and that they don't have the time to sit on the side of the road and do traffic enforcement, where we used to have that. We don't have it anymore, because they simply don't have the time. And that's people who are working 80+ hours a week already. So we need more troopers on the roads all the time. Always passionate about trying to, public safety is important to me. Education, cost sharing, hit on special needs, again, working on trying to get the state to fund that. The waste removal, we talked about that. It's gonna be, we need to find a new way. Polarization in politics. It's my personal goal, always. Anybody who's been on my Facebook page, I don't play the rhetoric card. I never say the Democrats did this, the Republicans did that. I don't believe in that. We're all in the same house. You know, there is a majority, sure, you know, but you know what? That majority sometimes makes up Republicans and Democrats together, right? Doesn't matter to me. I don't see people that way, and I don't tend to talk that way, especially on my social media and stuff like that. We're all in the same boat. We all think together.
So I wasn't obviously pointing at any of you.
No, listen, I'm.
In fact, the opposite.
Well,
It is incumbent upon us. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that those conversations are, you know,
Swimming a pond with others who may,
yeah,
underneath the golden dome that may not,
No, that is true.
yes.
sing along, so.
And I do what I can as a town official to, you know, promote civility and respect them. You know, I use the term common sense because I lump a lot into common sense. I actually have a mug that says it, and I bring it to all my town meetings. The other one I bring is I love milk, but that's helpful in my town. But it is true. It
Do
is
you
very,
bring
very-
cookies? That's all I want to know.
No, I don't, but I do bring other stuff. So, but that is true. I mean, things have just become way too
Mhm.
partisan and way too polarized. And there's a whole bunch of societal issues that seem to have gone into that, but it really is, you know, I've always been mindful in the public sphere that, you know, it's just not what I say, but how I say it and you know, how I act that, you know, can have an impact on people. And all the more so in my new upcoming position. So I do agree with you about that, because I think if we can get away from this hyper partisanship, we see it all the time in Washington. You know, if you can get away from that, you can actually get things done. But you know, this whole mentality of, well, I don't want to talk with someone just because they have a D after the name or an R after the name, that to me is ridiculous. We are all in the same. And we do need to do what we can. We do have, you know, there are philosophical differences even within the same caucus. There may be differences, and that's fine. That's good from a diversity point of view. But, you know, if you can't talk with people and try to work with people and find common sense solutions to these community issues, then government has just outright failed. So I think there still is a lot we can do working with people. And quite frankly, a lot of issues that we talk about do transcend politics and are common in various towns that various legislators have to represent, and that people in all the towns want us to be working on. So I agree with you on that. I agree, and I've said this many times publicly, I don't think the state does the job it should be doing to fund some of its core responsibilities, which is public education and public safety, or some of them. I think there's more can be done, and I'm pleased to be looking into what I can do as a ranking member on public safety to be of help. I have some meetings this week to look into some trooper issues as far as some other things that I may or others may be submitting for bills. But I think there are some things. I think the state talks a lot about public education and public safety, but it talks and then dumps it in your laps. I can see it on my end in my town what it does. But I think there are things that the state, if it really is a priority, the state has to put its money where its mouth is, but also really then, you know, make certain that it's not being heavy-handed with how the towns then are doing things. But if towns are doing something that's right, but just doesn't fit whatever the criteria list is, then why get penalized for it? You're doing something right for your town, that's good, that's what we want. And the state should be thanking you and seeing what it can do to more encourage it. So I think, and I'm hopeful that there can be some more push for what the state can do on public education, especially public safety. I think there's only a couple of towns in my district that actually have a police force. Otherwise, it's state troopers. And I agree with, you know, what Tammy and Tim said. We need more of them. I can tell you that
To about
speeding-
1,000. So 1,200 was the number. You guys did.
and the state never upheld that law.
But 1,000 would give you that
Yeah.
balance between you're not employing too many and too much, and too many troopers, and you're not giving too much overtime, like they're just, you know, pounding that crap out of the troopers right now.
yeah.
So it is, and that overtime, it comes at a cost as far as, you know, on them.
Synergy or not synergy, I can't think of the word, but that there's a balance in there, right around 1,000 troopers where they can balance it out, where it's fiscally responsible as well, so. Just please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Well, I'm looking into some things and there's some folks I've been talking with as far as some bills or other things to do. I think there is, I can tell you, in my town, speeding is a massive problem. I mean, the average speed is like 90 miles per hour, and that's not even a straight road. That's all the curvy roads. And people say, well, we know the curves, and even though we have no streetlights, we know where they are anyway, but you know, every day there's multiple posts on Facebook for my town. Oh, you know, so-and-so, there's a car off the ditch. You know, and it's rolled off into the woods, or, you know, it's on somebody's front lawn or whatever. And I don't know, you know, that's a mentality that people just feel they can speed, but I agree with you, if you have troopers out. You know, they will catch people, and that's part of what we want them to be doing to protect, because I can tell you, in my town, we have a big problem, people just seem to want to, for whatever reason, just pass school buses that are stopped with their lights on. That has become a major problem for us. And when we started to have troopers, spend some time following, boy, that seemed to cut down. Because no one would want to pass a trooper passing a bus, but when the troopers had to go to do other things, the incidence of it went up. So it's nothing like having.
School buses, there's automation that can help with that. And there's automation that'll be brought up in the legislative needs in regards to traffic enforcement. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but keep your eye open to some of it. It could assuage the school bus ones, darn near a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing people feel they can pass the school bus, and even I was part of a group that helped get cameras. And even then it was tough because we were hearing from Troop D, which covers Woodstock, that they just didn't have enough troopers to go and do things, and it's a tough situation. You know, that mentality of people think they can just speed and pass the school bus is just beyond me, but you know. Nothing like having troopers present though, to remind them, you know, that, hey, there's a penalty, and it's a big penalty. You know, when you do that.
Thanks for having this meeting though.
Of course.
Yes, this
I'm
is
gonna
great.
throw more traffic thing. I know Tammy knows it, but the Tolland Triangle.
Yeah,
where it's about
Yeah.
traffic Safety and car fires, you know, that, and then even to a lesser extent, the marsh swamp area next to that area that they cleaned up because of the beaver dam, but then a
Yeah.
lot of residents weren't happy about that. 'Cause
No, they didn't know.
even though they said it was an issue of flooding the highway, it was never really proven, and they think trying to get a fix to that, so there's actually a proper ecology over there to, you know, even though people fly by and see it, I think it still impacts a lot of people in that neighborhood and around that region, so. That's just the last thing I want to add in, but thank
no,
you.
there is the Tolland Triangle. This was a couple years ago about it,
Oh,
last year.
no.
Oh, it's been like a decade.
I know it's an ongoing issue, but it actually got circulated in some of the national news because it started to make some of.
All the car fires
AP
and accidents, yeah.
Yeah, the AP News Service picked up on it one time, showing the picture.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, or thank all three of you for coming tonight, and
Thank you.
looking forward to chatting further through the legislative session.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I look forward to attending more meetings. So,
You'll
well,
do
you
it.
have to be here, yeah.
Yes.
But even if I'm not at a meeting, by all means, I'll leave, or Brian, you can distribute my contact info.
I can do that.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to hear, even if I can't make a meeting.
Sounds good. Have a great,
And happy New Year, everybody.
happy New Year to you too. That brings us to 8.2, which is appointments to vacancies on various municipal boards and commissions. I would entertain a motion to approve the reappointment to the Blight Committee, Blight Review Committee is laid out in 2A.
So moved, Lulu.
So moved by Counselor Luba, seconded by Councilman Murray. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Old business, we have none. Item 10, report of the town manager.
Okay, so let's just touch on the storm. We had a pre-storm planning meeting, which I told all of you that I would, that would be my way of operating through storms or crisis or any emergency that we could foresee. So we had that planning meeting. I thought it went well. We had 10 utility crews assigned to Tolland via Eversource. Understand all 10 aren't out there working 24 hours a day as they're all on union. They're all union and have to have required breaks. Obviously, we're electricity. Town staff did an amazing job, I thought. Fire department, volunteer fire department, the ambulance folks, DPW, they just did an outstanding job getting roads cleared and really hustling out there. And I tried to be there with them as much as possible. Obviously, some lessons learned, and some we did an after action today on one part of the meetings today. The library was great and a good spot for people to come and warm up. Basically, anytime we've ever had a heating, a warming center, no one's ever come to use it. But either way, we have to have a plan, and I'm going to get a more fortified plan moving forward. That's what the meeting was mostly about today. So. All in all, I thought we did pretty well with the storm.
Are there any questions from council members about? Councilor Khan?
I like what you said about the plan. But I mean, it's fire training center and senior center, we are heating up anyway 24/7. So why can we should open it up. Library was open from 10 to 2, so how many people didn't know that? I didn't know that. There was a couple of families, they slept in a car. And they came to my gas station to use the bathroom. But even when it's a spa. But so that's why I responded to your email. That was not a appropriate way to handle a major storm or whatever we had it. I think we should do a little bit better job for the taxpayer.
Okay, so we had the staff if we open. And find staff and that was a part of our plan for the senior center. We did try to communicate it as best we could, as much as we could, myself included, to stay on top of it 24/7 while we were in it. The senior center was available to anyone that needed it. And we had staff, volunteer staff, to include myself, the top of the list, Chief Lightel, and Bev Bellady from Human Services to begin with, before we went out to CERT or any of John's staff. So that plan was there. I believe we communicated it. I can communicate it more next time, but I tried as much as I could, and I'm sorry to hear that a family slept in the car. That is the first I've heard of it. But thank you for your input.
I wouldn't say it unless if I
Yeah.
myself. I wouldn't make a comment. No.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilor?
Not so much a question, but an expression of gratitude for all the updates. I thought the Facebook updates were great as someone who didn't have power for a while. I had my phone worked, so.
I didn't know you had that power.
No, we didn't get back till last Saturday afternoon, so, we managed to stay warm. We slept in our house, so that's all good. But thank you very much for the updates, and I think, to start to understand, or for you to start to challenge you to start to think about how to make sure more people know that you are providing updates and where can they find them.
Yeah.
I think is in your wheelhouse anyway, but let's make sure that people who were sleeping in their car next time know where to go for a warming center.
Right.
However, we could do that.
E-blast.
I don't know.
The reverse 911 might be something to consider. I know we've used in the past. It's usually been for like truly substantial emergency. Like the last time we might have used it was when the pandemic first hit, or Isaias.
You're talking about the Everbridge system?
Yeah, so getting like, it gets out to every person's voicemail, like even a 20-second message saying, you know, call this number or reach out to this person, go to this office to see us if you need shelter, if you need food assistance.
I know they're very guarded in how that is used.
Yeah, so it's judicious, but
Watching, another municipality down the other end of the state with mayor once was in jail, do some questionable things with the system. I know, I remember it was very, stringent, but I'm happy to look into that.
Yeah, and I trust the discretion of you and the public safety team to decide when it's necessary. I mean, there's this balance and
Yep.
you guys are getting into it way more than we are, so I don't need to get into those weeds, but yeah, anything we can do to get more residents know, I mean, an e-blast or a no power situation seems a little counterintuitive, right? Because probably, maybe you don't have power, so it's hard to read an email. But I don't know how else to get these communications out, and I'm sure you'll think of
We will,
interesting ideas.
yeah, prior to the storm and stuff, there's some stuff we can do, so.
Yeah. And I think the more people know, it becomes a good cycle, so. We'll continue, but thank you.
And I do appreciate it that, how can I say, you, personally, you, Glenn. I usually don't say it, but since you came on board, there's a difference.
Thank you.
There's a difference in the management. I do appreciate it personally.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm here for all of you.
One more thing, since we are on your issue, heating assistant, oil,
Yes,
what do you know about that?
it's bad. It's as busy as it's ever been. 200 or so people as of today. I spoke with Bev about it. We have our assistant human services director leaving. We'll be putting another one on, or posting that soon, and bringing in temporary help to bridge that divide.
Because what I heard is like about 10 days ago. Yeah, roughly about 10 days ago that they ran out of the fund and they told people, yours, go find your own,
That's the first I've heard of that. First I've heard.
on it.
I heard,
It's not something,
You heard that too?
no, I heard 10 days ago that they were upping the amount being given due to the increased cost of oil.
that they went down to $100 and then after that, we are out of fund.
I'm happy to look into that and get your response tomorrow. That's
Would
the
you
first.
Thank you.
There's a lot of limitations on that too, though, you know, there's income limitations, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into that. And you only get qualified for a certain amount based on.
No,
your income.
I'm talking about the people who's getting it.
Yeah, well, there was a significant reduction in the money that the federal government supplied to the state and that the state is supplying out. We did put more money into it when we went into special session, but it's still gonna be, I think they're saying it's still gonna be around half of what they got prior in the last 2 years. Because the last 2 years, it was also being funded by federal dollars. So, and with the cost of
The
oil
cost-
being
the
what
cost,
it
yeah.
is,
So-
they're not gonna, yeah, they're not gonna increase it to keep up with that. They can't, like, you'd be looking at the state, the amount of money the state would have to pay for that. I don't see them doing it. You know, we've been screaming about it for a while, that the cost what you got last year, you're not even gonna get a tank of oil,
Yeah, because.
right? Because of the cost of it. Exactly, right. But that's an investment that the state of Connecticut is just not willing to make right now. Unfortunately. So, and the towns don't have funds. The only funds the town has is the funds that the state gives them. So it's, you know, and it's, the sad thing is there's a heck of a lot of people out there that don't even qualify that are having these issues, senior citizens across the board, fixed incomes, regular, just middle-class people who don't meet the income qualifications and aren't getting any help. You know, it's truly tragic, but you know, there's nothing that Brian and them, short of us creating some sort of fund, yeah, at a town level and building it into the budget, it's they're totally reliant on the state to give them the money. for those programs. They are actually, they're state programs that the town just administers the applications for, so.
Thank you for, I didn't know that, so that's why I had to, for my own information, maybe I can answer them because people do come to me and ask them, Sammy, how come? And I said, I don't know.
I'm assuming, voice on the ground is great and it gets funneled back up and then, you get the answers speeded up versus everybody being uncertain.
So true, Sam, I always appreciate that you tell us, because everybody does tell you everything.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
A detective, they say a detective's only as good as his informants. You've got a lot of informants there.
That's what I said, I'm not from this room, I'm not also room.
All right, that brings us to item 11, adoption of minutes. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes as laid out in 11.1 through 11.3. Is
So moved.
there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilman Yudichak. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Lost my voice for a second there.
Okay.
That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Item 12, correspondence to council. I think you only have like a couple. come in.
I think there was just one. About
The energy efficiency or,
new construction.
Yeah.
And everything else has been business related.
that brings item 13, chairperson's report. I mentioned it briefly. I know Brian. Oh,
I
Yeah,
just
question?
want to ask you before we move, what's going on between you two that about the town hall meetings? Any update, what, we are doing it, it's been more than a year, so we've been talking about it, but it's almost the end of my term.
I think they're like 11 more months. 10
Yeah,
years.
you got my- I know.
Right, guys.
You're talking about, yeah, here.
Well, like, I'll be getting something out of it, we're just talking just like a state of Connecticut.
Yeah, I haven't gotten an answer. The person I wanted to talk to is out, so. I haven't gotten
The
an
only
answer.
thing, the only thing I can suggest, if you're not getting anywhere, so like, it has to be minimum 3 people, no more than 3 people. So I'm just saying that, okay, John and Tommy, and they won't be there, we can alternate the 3 into 4, so like, you know what? I don't need your approval.
It was a request that was made a few months ago about having like a very big meet and greet with all the boards and commissions to come together and have the public come and talk about it. And we were originally trying to slate it for the holidays and it kind of got lost and we were trying to get some clarification for FOIA issues. It would have been back in September, October, because I know you had some concerns about FOIA and
Yeah.
having everybody together at once.
Okay, I
and
thought
meeting
you meant like
everybody.
the town hall, like with the residents, so you just mean all the elected.
Well, inviting the residents to come in and talk with various groups and get like the touch base and sort of like a town hall style.
Touch base with the community. Basically, that's the goal. I mean, it's not something that we are trying to achieve something, but it's like, you know what? Land like Steve and every board of each, everybody is there, but if you, 3 of us, just, I mean, alternate. I'm fine with that. We don't need any approval, or we don't need to wait for the answer.
Yeah.
But I'd like to get something going rather than keep waiting for another.
Right, no, hopefully we'll get some word back from Katie, but yeah, ideally we want to get something that we can kind of have that the residents come in and talk to people without having it be construed as a legal meeting or anything that could put the town in trouble. Like from a liability standpoint, but yeah, I do agree it's something we still want to work on.
Yeah, I haven't forgotten. The best person for me to talk to is in next week, everybody's back.
As I said, we don't have to be 7 of
Right.
us, and we can be 2 and 2, whatever, it is, but it's like,
I know what you're
just
saying.
keep it going.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. So chairperson's report, one quick adjustment is the chair hour is switching from Thursdays to Wednesdays, just do a personal change for me. So we're doing the first Wednesday of the month, still same time and location, 6:30 at the library. So at least for the first 6 months of the year, it will be Wednesdays instead of Thursdays. Otherwise, last week we had a CROG meeting. We did approve legislative agenda that was referenced tonight. There were a few other items that were approved. A resolution authorizing agreement with Yale and Prague for some services, an MOU for the Capital Regional Chiefs of Police Association. There was a contract execution between CROG and EPR for fire EMS record management software, and we approved our meeting schedule for the next year. So those are a few other items that were done for. And that's it for me. That brings us to 14 communications petitions from council members. And we got Sammy's for the meet and greet with elected officials, trying to get that to a point where we can maybe not have a quorum of folks there, so that we can just have residents come in and speak. Are there any other communications and petitions?
I don't think you'd be able to do that, like just have like one person from plan and zoning, 2 or 3 from council.
That's what I'm saying.
And then-
It doesn't have to be all 7 of us.
Or could it
be
just
2
be
and
even
2, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The chairs and the vice chairs even, something like
That's
that.
something I do provide an invite for any of the chair hours. Usually I try and send a text or an email to the chairs for PCC, ZBA and Board of Ed. If they want to come to the chair hour, it could be a chairs joint hour. We can all be there to talk about certain issues. But yeah, it would be good to have more public and that maybe have a few different folks.
Or somehow.
Yeah. Only other communication I'll say is wishing everyone, hope you all had a great holiday weekend, Christmas weekend, and a happy new year to everybody as we go forward on the budget. We're going, this was good. We kind of kept this as a light meeting, but a lot of good discussion, but we're giving a lot more in-depth discussions next year going into the budget. So looking forward to all that, all of you.
Everybody seems enthused.
I know, yeah. All right, with that, we'll move to 15, public list participation on any subject in the jurisdiction of town council with 3-minute limit. Is there anybody online, which I don't believe there are, and there's no one in public that would like to speak? But I'll give it once.
Luba got the finger.
No, he's.
Oh, no, he's just contemplating. No. Ooh, I know you're out in the public. All right, going once. Going twice. All right, I'll move to adjourn or I'll entertain a motion to move to adjourn at 9:47 p.m.
So.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Happy New Year. We are adjourned. Have a great night.
See you, Lou.